Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation Bedtime History. Tonight we step into a winter storm over a medieval river, where the wind combs the water into black ripples. The bridge groans under carts and hooves, and one narrow stone house clings to the middle of it all, like it has made a very questionable life choice. Sleet taps the shutters, smoke leaks from a crooked chimney somewhere below. The river keeps rolling, cold and patient, as if it has all night and absolutely no concern for your comfort. You probably won't survive this, at least not with dry socks, but we shall be brave in the most horizontal way possible. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell me where you are listening from, and what the local time is where you are. I love imagining this little sleepy caravan gathering across the world. Now, dim the lights, and feel yourself arriving on the muddy road. Just as evening lowers over the river, you trudge forward with your cloak pulled tight around your shoulders. The wool is heavy with damp, smelling of sheep, smoke, and road. Each step presses into half-frozen mud, and when you lift your foot, the earth seems reluctant to let you go. Ahead, the stone bridge rises from mist, broad enough for pack horses, carts, and walkers to share, though not politely. Medieval traffic management is mostly patience, shouting and hoping nobody's ox has strong opinions. The storm has come hard from the west. It rattles bare willows along the bank and flings ice against your cheek. The river below is swollen by winter rain. It pushes at the bridge piers with a deep murmur, not quite a roar, not quite a whisper, more like a sleeping giant turning under black blankets. You hear it before you see it clearly, and the sound follows you between the gusts. This bridge is not just a crossing, it is a street, a market, a threshold, and tonight, possibly your bed in many medieval towns, where land inside the walls was precious. Bridges became crowded with shops, chapels, gatehouses, and dwellings. London Bridge is the famous example. But it was not alone. Across Europe, bridges gathered little worlds upon themselves because where people crossed, people bought things and someone wanted rent. You step onto the fir stones, slick beneath your boots and worn by generations of soles, wheels, and hooves. The parapet to your left is low enough that you become very respectful of gravity. A lantern swings from a bracket fixed into stone. Its flame struggles behind cloudy horn panes, shrinking and blooming in the draught. The light catches the wet face of the bridge house ahead. It is narrow, perhaps 2 stories, wedged against another structure that seems to lean in for warmth. Its walls are stone below, patched with timber above, and the roof is steep, dark, and shining with sleet. A signboard knocks softly in the wind. Maybe an ale flag, maybe a fish, maybe just a warning from the universe. The house looks as though it has grown out of the bridge. Its lower stones match the arch beside it, mottled with lichen and soot. The doorway is low, and the threshold is raised against flood splash, mud, and the general medieval belief that inconvenience builds character. A slit window glows amber above, promising firelight, shelter, and the possibility that your toes may resume diplomatic relations with the rest of you. A mainstream fact settles gently into the scene. Medieval stone bridges were expensive civic treasures, often funded by kings, bishops, towns, guilds, or charitable gifts, because a reliable crossing could transform trade. Carts avoided ferries, pilgrims moved more safely, markets expanded, and tolls could be collected with admirable enthusiasm. A bridge made a town richer, busier, and louder, which sounds grand until you're trying to sleep inside it during a storm. There is comfort in the noise. The river presses below. The shutters tremble in their frames. From somewhere inside comes the muted sound of a pot being shifted on a hearth. Iron against stone, soft and domestic. Then the smell reaches you: wood smoke, damp wool, old rushes on the floor, and something savoury simmering slowly. Maybe onions, maybe peas, maybe a stew that has been introduced to meat at some distant point and still speaks fondly of the meeting. Your stomach, quite out of her politeness, offers an opinion. There is a quirky tidbit tucked into the edges of the bridge world. Some medieval bridges had small religious figures, charms, or painted saints set near entrances, not just for beauty, but as spiritual traffic calming. Travellers might cross themselves, mutter a prayer, or leave a coin, because rivers were useful, but also frightening. Water took wheels, animals, houses, and people when it pleased. A bridge was engineering, yes, but also negotiation with danger. The storm sharpens, sleet ticks faster against your hood. Your fingers are stiff around your bundle. You look down through a gap between parapet stones and see foam shifting in the darkness below. The height is not enormous, perhaps, but it is enough. Enough to make the bridge feel alive, enough to make the house seem brave. Historians still argue whether ordinary medieval travellers felt more awe, fear, or plain annoyance when crossing large stone bridges in bad weather, since records favour clerks, patrons, and officials over tired people with wet feet. But your body gives one possible answer: awe at the arches, fear of the black water, annoyance because the wind has found the gap at your neck again. Very talented. Very rude. A shutter opens above with a blunt wooden knock. A face appears in the warm square of light. Older, round-cheeked, wrapped in a coif, eyes narrowed against the weather. The person studies you, then your bundle, your boots, and the road behind you. Medieval hospitality is generous in stories, but in practice it likes to know whether you can pay, whether you carry fleas, and whether you seem likely to steal the spoons. You raise one cold hand in greeting. Your voice comes out smaller than you intended, snatched by the gust. You ask for shelter. Not much. A place by the wall, a bit of straw, anything out of the storm. The face disappears. Bolts shift inside, a bar lifts, the door opens inward, and firelight spills across the wet stones at your feet. Warmth breathes out in a smoky wave. It is not modern warmth, clean and obedient. It is uneven and fragrant, the kind that lives near the hearth and fades in the corners, but it touches your face, and for a moment, it feels like mercy. You duck beneath the low lintel and step inside, leaving the storm to worry the bridge without you. Behind you. The door closes with a thick wooden thud. The river remains below, still speaking through the stones, but now it is muffled. The house holds you in dim amber light. Your eyes adjust, your shoulders lower. Somewhere overhead, a beam creaks and the night settles closer. Night. The warmth does not greet you all at once. It reaches in little waves, uncertain at first, curling around your wet sleeves, your chilled knees, the stiff line of your jaw. You stand just inside the door, blinking in smoke and firelight, while the bridge house accepts you with the slow suspicion of an old cat. The room is narrow, because everything on a bridge must earn its place. One wall is stone, thick and damp, with darker patches where the winter has pressed its fingers through. The opposite wall is partly timber and plaster, patched in places with whatever a practical household could afford. Overhead, beams run low enough that a tall person must negotiate with them carefully. Medieval architecture does not flatter the forehead. A rushlight burns on a small table. Its flame is thin and wavering. Fed by a strip of pith soaked in fat, it gives a soft, greasy glow and a smell that is not exactly pleasant, but after the storm outside you are willing to call it charming. A stool waits near the hearth. A wooden chest sits against the wall. Hooks hold cloaks, sacks, a coil of rope, and a lantern. Everything has been placed with the discipline of a home that cannot waste space. The person who opened the door gestures for you to move away from the threshold. You obey, because cold air is still pushing at your back, trying to come in as an unpaid guest. The door is barred again. The storm is reduced to a dull hiss beyond the planks. You lower your bundle. Your boots leave wet marks on the floor. Beneath the rushes, the boards feel uneven, and beneath those boards, though you cannot see it, the bridge carries its own hidden limestone arches, damp cavities, narrow storage places, and the river pressing through the darkness below. A bridge house is a compromise. It is shelter, shop, toll post, lodging, and risk, all balanced above moving water. Houses like this grew where traffic grew. A town could run out of room within its walls, but a bridge offered a strange extra street. Build upward, build outward, squeeze a booth between a chapel and a gate, then add a chamber above it. Simple, really, very medieval. If there is a flat surface, someone will rent it. You hear feet passing outside, hooves clatter. A cartwheel bumps over a stone joint with a hard wooden crack. Voices rise, then fade, swallowed by wind. The house trembles very slightly, not enough to alarm you, but enough to remind you that your floor is also part of a public road. Modern apartments have upstairs the neighbours. This one has livestock, toll collectors, and possibly a pilgrim with a cough, the keeper, or perhaps the keeper's spouse, looks you over by the fire. Their wool gown is patched at the elbows. Their hands are reddened by cold water and work. They ask where you have come from, and you name a road behind you, a village, a market, a route that sounds humble and plausible. You do not over-decorate the story. In a medieval household, news is welcome, nonsense less so. You are told you may stay the night if you pay a small coin. Help keep the fire fed, and do not disturb the chest by the wall. A fair bargain. The chest, naturally, becomes the most interesting object in the room. A mainstream fact rests quietly beneath this bargain. Medieval bridges were often controlled by local authorities, religious foundations, or private lords who could charge tolls for maintenance. Those tolls might apply to carts, animals, goods, or travellers, and the money was supposed to keep the bridge repaired. Supposed to, which is a flexible phrase in any century, still without revenue. Stonework failed, timber rotted, and the river took back what it considered badly managed. You rub your hands close to the hearth, careful not to burn your palms. The fire sits on a stone hearth, with smoke climbing toward a hood and then wandering wherever it likes before finding the chimney. The smoke stings your eyes, but it also dries the air around you. Sparks snap softly. A log settles. The room smells of ash, damp cloth, onions, and the faint sourness of Zorro. Day. A small window faces the bridge roadway. Its shutter is fastened from within, but a crack shows the passing lantern light outside each time someone crosses. Shadows slide across the room, long and distorted. It feels as if the bridge itself is dreaming travellers into the walls. The keeper tells you this house has stood through 15 winters, perhaps 20, depending on whether one counts the year of the Great Repair. People in the Middle Ages are fond of counting around disasters, before the flood, after the fire, during the year of the hard frost. Time is not always a neat number. Sometimes it is a scar on a stone. You follow their gesture toward a rear passage so narrow that your shoulder brushes cold masonry. Here, the sound changes. The fire falls behind you, and the river grows louder. You realize that the house is built partly into the bridge structure itself. With a small lower chamber tucked near the stonework, it may hold barrels, nets, spare boards, sacks of grain, or tools for repair. The air is colder here, with a mineral smell, wet stone and old lime. A quirky tidbit drifts up from such places in some medieval towns. Bridge buildings became so crowded and irregular that visitors describe them as little streets in the air. On London Bridge, later records speak of houses projecting over the sides, signs creaking above heads, and residents living in a place that was both neighbourhood and bottleneck. Imagine misplacing your goat in that arrangement. Not ideal, though perhaps exciting for the goat. You return to the main room, glad of the fire. The keeper points upward to a ladder stair fixed along the wall. Above, a loft or upper chamber lies in shadow. That is where you will sleep later. Once the household has finished its evening work, for now, you sit on the stool and let your wet cloak drip near the hearth. Not too close. Wool can scorch, and smelling like burned sheep is not the bedtime atmosphere we are cultivating. Outside, the bridge changes character as night thickens. Daytime commerce thins into hurried movement. The last cart drivers want lodging before the road becomes impossible. A pair of men pass under the window speaking of a blocked ford downstream. Someone laughs too loudly, the laugh of a person trying to sound less cold. A bell rings once from somewhere near the far end, perhaps from a gate, perhaps from a chapel. The note softened by weather. Scholars continue to debate how many bridge dwellings were truly homes in the intimate sense, and how many were primarily shops, toll rooms, or commercial lodgings with sleeping space tucked wherever possible. But as you sit here, warming your fingers, the distinction feels less tidy. A home is where someone keeps the salt dry, hides coins from thieves, scolds the draft under the door, and knows which floorboard complains at midnight. By that measure, this narrow place is very much alive. You notice the walls now, not just their damp, but their effort. Stones of different sizes have been fitted and refitted, some older, some newer, patched with mortar that has dried pale in the cracks. The bridge is not a single perfect work. It is a long argument with weather, traffic, money, and time. This house is one sentence in that argument, written above the river in smoked timber and stone. The keeper hands you a rough cloth to dry your face. It smells of linen, ashes, and human use. You accept it gratefully. Your cheeks begin to tingle as warmth returns. The storm still claws at the shutters, but inside, the room has its rhythm fire. Footsteps, breath, water below, wind outside, a small rhythm but steady. And because you've crossed from the road into shelter, because the door is barred and the bridge holds beneath you, you allow yourself, just for a moment, to believe the night may be kind. The cloth leaves your face warmer, though still tender from the cold. You fold it once, then twice, because small courtesies matter in cramped rooms, and hand it back to the keeper. They take it with a nod, not quite friendly, not unfriendly either, in a house balanced over winter water. Trust arrives slowly, like heat through damp boots. You remain near the hearth while the household continues around you. The keeper moves with practiced economy, stepping around stools, ducking beneath beams, reaching for things without looking. A key ring hangs from their belt, iron teeth knocking softly together with each turn. It is not a grand sound, not the bright music of royal halls or dramatic castle doors, but it has authority. Keys mean access, keys mean duty, keys mean that someone must wake when others sleep. On the table lies a small tally stick, notched along one side. Beside it sits a dish with a few coins, dark with handling. A scrap of waxed board shows words with marks from earlier accounts, scratched with a stylus, rubbed smooth, marked again. This is not the glamorous part of medieval history. Naturally, nobody writes heroic songs about counting cart fees in bad weather, yet without such quiet accounting, the bridge would crumble, the road would fail, and everyone would stand on the riverbank arguing with a ferry. The keeper notices your glance and, perhaps because you paid your coin without complaint, lets you look closer. The tally stick records tolls taken during the day, a cart of firewood, 2 pack horses, a man with baskets of eels, a flock of geese driven across in a storm, which sounds less like commerce and more like a punishment invented for someone in a morality tale. The keeper gives a dry little smile when you ask about that. Geese, they say, are wicked travellers. A mainstream historical fact rests inside the room with the keys and coins toll collectors. Bridge wardens, and keepers were part of the practical machinery of medieval transport. Bridges needed constant supervision, because traffic damaged surfaces, floods threatened piers, and money collected for upkeep had to be tracked. In some places, bridge wardens answered to civic councils or church institutions, and their records could become surprisingly detailed. Medieval people loved a record when money was involved. Some habits are eternal. You sit with your hands cupped around a wooden mug. The drink inside is small ale, weak and cloudy, safer than many questionable water sources and ordinary enough for daily life. It tastes sour, grainy, and faintly comforting. Your stomach accepts it politely. The warmth of the cup spreads into your palms. The keeper's room is not private in the way a modern room might be private. It is a station, kitchen, office, refuge, and watch point. A person might come knocking for passage after curfew. A traveller might beg shelter. A cartwheel might break on the bridge stones. A flood might rise in the night. And then the keeper's sleep would matter less than ropes, lanterns, and shouting. Near the door stands a staff capped with iron. It could be used to test stones, prod debris, guide animals, or discourage foolishness. Medieval multitasking, as ever. Involves wood, metal, and a willingness to look unimpressed. Above it hangs a leather purse, stiff from wet weather. Below it, a pair of wooden pattens rests by the threshold, raised overshoes meant to lift feet above mud. They are simple things, but you admire them with almost religious feeling. After walking through winter muck, any invention that separates you from sludge deserves poetry. The storm slams a gust against the shutters, the latch jerks, holds, sleet tattles. For a moment the fire bends sideways, and smoke folds low into the room. The keeper mutters something uncomplimentary about the wind. Not quite a prayer, not quite a curse, PG enough for our purposes, but the sentiment is ancient and very clear. Then comes a knock at the door. Everyone pauses. Even the fire seems to listen. The keeper takes the lantern, lifts the bee and opens the door only a hand's width. A slice of cold enters, white with sleet. Outside stands a man hunched under a hood, beard silvered with ice, leading a mule whose ears look deeply offended. He has paid earlier, he says, but must cross back with a message for the miller. The keeper asks for his token. He produces a little lead badge from beneath his cloak. The keeper studies it near the lantern, then allows him through the bridge gate beyond. You watch this small exchange with sleepy fascination. A house on a bridge is never fully apart from the world. It is a hinge. People arrive with errands, coins, rumours, animals, and weather clinging to them. The keeper hears all of it. When the door closes again, the room feels warmer by contrast. The keeper drops the bar back into place and returns to the hearth, rubbing one knee. They tell you the river has been rising since noon. Not dangerously, perhaps, but enough to keep an ear open. There's a mark on the lower wall, they say, from the winter when water came over the bank and licked at the bridge steps. They remember the smell, most clearly mud, drowned straw, wet ashes, and fish left where no fish should be. You glance toward the shadowed passage you saw earlier. The river's sound seems deeper now, or perhaps you are only listening more closely. Below the floor, the current pushes around the piers and between the arches. Stone holds, mortar holds. The bridge stands because many hands have made it stand, and because tonight, so far, the river allows it. A quirky tidbit enters by way of the keeper's gossip. Some travellers believe that if you speak too proudly while crossing a bridge, the river will remember and punish you later. Others say a bridge has a temper when first built, and must be soothed with blessings, coins, or even old shoes hidden in the masonry. Old shoes have indeed been found in Waldorf holes and buildings from later centuries, often placed as charms against misfortune. Whether every shoe knew its job is another matter. Imagine being a shoe and suddenly responsible for structural luck. A promotion, technically. The keeper gestures to the ring of keys again. One opens the bridge gate at the townward end. One fits the toll chest. One belongs to a small storeroom under the stairs. Another, they say, is older than the lock it now serves. Because nobody throws away a good key. You understand, there is something satisfying about a key with history, even if it opens a door that sticks and complains. Historians still argue whether bridge keepers were seen mainly as minor officials, tradespeople, householders, or all of these at once. Since the role changed from town to town and century to century, in this room, that debate becomes pleasantly irrelevant. The keeper is the person who knows the sounds of the bridge. Which footfall belongs to a neighbour? Which wheel crack means trouble? Which gust means close the upper shutter? Which smell means the river has brought something unpleasant from upstream? Expertise can wear a patched sleeve. You help feed the fire. The keeper hands you a split log, and you place it carefully into the orange bed of coals. Sparks rise like brief golden insects, then vanish into the smoke. Your damp cloak begins to steam faintly on its peg. Your boots soften near the hearth. The room gathers closer around you, dim, practical, full of small objects with work behind them. The toll coins are covered, the tally stick is set aside, the keys rest quiet against the keeper's belt. Outside, the mule's hooves fade across the bridge, then disappear into the wind. The river continues below, but the hearth answers it. Crackle for murmur, ember for current, warmth for cold. You sit in the keeper's small room and feel the night becoming less like an enemy and more like a story being told slowly through stone. The story in the stones continues beneath your feet. At first, you hear the river only as a murmur, a low-running note under the crackle of the hearth and the keeper's quiet movements. But after a while, once your body is warmed and your thoughts have slowed, the sound separates into layers. There is the slap of water against the piers. There is a hollow gurgle where the current is drawn through one arch more sharply than another. There is the occasional dull knock of driftwood touching stone, then sliding away into darkness. You become aware that you are not simply beside the river. You are above it, suspended over it. Sleeping here will not be like sleeping in a cottage by a field, where the worst beneath you is beetles, roots, and perhaps a chicken with boundary issues. Here, below the boards and stone, winter water is moving all night, strong enough to carry logs, carts, fish traps, and careless men downstream. The keeper sees you listening and gives a small nod, as if you have finally met the true landlord. Best not think on it too much, they say. Naturally, this makes you think on it much more. They lift the lantern and lead you again toward the narrow passage where the warmth thins. You follow, one hand brushing the wall for balance. The stone feels slick in places, colder than the air, with the deep chill of things that have never known sunlight. The passage opens into a cramped lower space used for storage. Barrels stand on blocks to keep them above damp. Bundles of spare kindling are stacked away from the wall. A coil of rope hangs from a peg, and beside it are iron hooks, a mallet and a long pole darkened by use. At the far side, a small opening in the masonry allows sound to enter more clearly. Not a window exactly, more a practical gap, barred and shuttered, where a person might check the water level or pass a rope. Through it comes a breath of river air, raw and metallic, smelling of silt, weed, whetstone, and cold fish. The lantern flame leans toward it, then draws back. You crouch, careful of your knees, and peer through the gap below. The water is black except where it catches lantern light in shattered amber flecks. The current swirls around the pier with muscular patience. You cannot see the whole arch from here, only a curve of stone vanishing into dark, but you feel its importance. This curve carries roadway, house, people, animals, trade, rumour, taxes, prayers, and your soon-to-be sleeping self. The great achievement of a stone bridge lies in that curve. Medieval builders used arches because an arch turns weight outward and downward into its supports. Stone is not fond of bending, but it is excellent at being pressed. Each wedge-shaped stone in the arch, each voussoir, leans into its neighbour, and together they hold more than any one block could manage alone. It's almost annoyingly poetic. The stones survive by depending on one another. Very sweet, very structurally sound. Yet the bridge is not perfect or effortless. It has been repaired. You can see places where older masonry meets newer patching. Mortar lines differ. Some stones are smoother, others rougher. The keeper tells you that masons come when cracks widen, when floods scour around the base, when carts loosen the paving, or when some optimistic driver tries to take a load across that would have made even a saint sigh. Lime mortar is the quiet companion of the stone. Made by burning limestone and mixing the resulting lime with sand and water, it binds the blocks, seals gaps, and slowly hardens over time. It is not like modern cement. No matter how much your modern brain wants to simplify things, it breathes, shifts, and works with the wall. It can also fail when badly made, washed out, or neglected. Medieval builders knew this through craft rather than laboratory charts, which is a humbling reminder that expertise does not always arrive wearing safety goggles. A less expected belief clings to bridge building as well. In some medieval and early modern traditions, people told stories of bridges needing a sacrifice, a charm, or a living shadow to make them endure. Legends from different regions speak of animals, objects, or even the first soul to cross being claimed by the bridge or the river. These tales are not construction manuals, thankfully, but they show how uneasy people felt about forcing a road over dangerous water. When a bridge stood, it seemed practical. When it failed, it seemed personal. You hear the water suck and slap below, and you understand the feeling. The river is not evil, it is simply itself. But that may be worse. Evil can be negotiated with in stories. Water only follows gravity and opportunity. The keeper raises the lantern higher, showing you a mark scratched into the stone beside the opening, then another, lower, then a third, almost hidden in grime. Watermarks, memory marks, each one belongs to a flood or near flood, a year spoken of afterward in kitchens, markets, and church porches. The highest mark sits uncomfortably close to where your shoulder is now. You ask when that happened. The keeper names a winter from years ago. After weeks of rain and a sudden thaw in the hills, ice came down river in plates. Branches jammed against the pier. Men stood with poles, trying to break the debris loose before the current pressed too hard. The bridge held, but the lower rooms filled. And people remembered the sound most of all: grinding ice, shouting, bells, water inside walls. Researchers continue to disagree about how often ordinary medieval bridge users understood the engineering behind arches, rather than trusting builders, patrons, custom, and divine protection. Some must have known a great deal from work and observation. Others may simply have crossed quickly, paid the toll, and hoped the stones were in a good mood. Standing here, with the lantern trembling at the river breathing below, you feel both possibilities inside yourself. You admire the craft, you also hope the stones are feeling generous. The house creaks overhead. Someone passes on the road above, perhaps a late traveller guided by a shielded lamp. The sound comes down through wood and stone, softened by layers. Footstep, hoof, cart, river, wind. The bridge makes a kind of music out of everything that touches it. The keeper shutters the opening, not fully, but enough to tame the draught. The river sound muffles again. You follow them back through the passage, and with every step toward the hearth, the room regains its familiar scent: smoke, ale, damp wool, onions, old straw. The fire seems brighter after the cold lower chamber. It paints the stones in moving orange and makes the shadows sway as though the whole house is floating. You settle again near the hearth, but now the floor feels different, not unsafe exactly, more alive. You know what lies beneath. And knowledge has weight. Your ears keep drifting downward, drawn to the hidden rush of water below the boards. The keeper adds a small piece of wood to the fire. It catches slowly, glowing along one edge before flame rises. They do not speak for a while. And neither do you. There is no need to fill the room. The river is doing enough talking for everyone. Outside, the storm continues, but inside you hold two truths at once. The bridge is vulnerable. Always. The bridge is strong tonight. It has held carts and horses, sellers and pilgrims, children running errands, old women carrying baskets, toll keepers with aching knees, and now you, a cold traveller gradually becoming warm. The arch below carries all of it in silence. Stone presses into stone. Mortar grips. The river moves on beneath, never still, never sleeping. While above it, in a little bridge house lit by fire, you begin to trust the dark curve holding you over the water. The trust comes slowly, like warmth reaching the centre of a stone. You sit a little longer by the hearth, listening to the hidden river and watching the keeper's vehicle into its red heart. The flames shrink and stretch. Ash falls in soft sighs. Every so often the wind presses against the walls, and the house answers with a wooden murmur from somewhere above, a rafter shifting, a peg complaining, a roof tile remembering it has choices. At last the keeper points toward the ladder stair. Your sleeping place waits above. You lift your bundle and stand carefully. Your legs have grown heavy from heat and ale, and your boots, though less wet than before, still feel like cold animals attached to your feet. The ladder is steep, more a negotiated climb than a staircase. Medieval domestic design often seems to assume that anyone entering an upper room has both strong knees and a forgiving personality. You place one hand on the side rail, the wood polished smooth by many palms, and begin to climb. The air changes as you rise. Smoke gathers near the ceiling, thinner now but still present, with that dry, bitter smell that catches in the throat. Heat gathers too, because warm air prefers the rafters, which is one of the few medieval household arrangements that seems entirely fair. The lower room belongs to work, the upper room belongs to rest, storage, and anyone short enough not to strike a beam in the dark. Your head emerges into the chamber above. It is smaller than you imagined, though perhaps everything in this house is smaller than imagination. The roof slopes sharply on both sides, creating shadowed corners where sacks, baskets, and folded cloth are stored. The beams are blackened by years of smoke, rubbed smooth in places, rough and splintered in others. A narrow shuttered window faces upstream through its cracks. The storm breathes thin lines of cold air into the room. The floorboards creak under your weight. Beneath them is the hearth room. Beneath that, the stonework. Beneath that, the river. This vertical arrangement does not invite deep philosophical calm at first, but you are tired enough to accept it. A straw mattress lies against the inner wall, raised slightly on a simple wooden frame. The mattress is not the soft cloud-likeness promised by modern advertisements, which tend to speak as if sleep is a luxury spa arranged by angels. This bed is a sack stuffed with straw or chaff, lumpy in places, flattened in others, and faintly fragrant with dry stalks, dust, and the ghost of summer fields. It rustles when you touch it. It also contains, quite possibly, tiny roommates. We shall not dwell on them. They pay no rent and have terrible manners. Still, compared to the road, it is magnificent. Beside it lies a wool blanket, thick and coarse, and another lighter covering that smells faintly of smoke and lanolin. Wool was one of the great textiles of medieval Europe. Woven, fulled, dyed, traded, taxed, and worn by nearly everyone in some form. England's medieval economy, for example, became deeply tied to wool production and export, with raw wool and finished cloth shaping. Fortunes from shepherds to merchants, tonight. However, wool is not an export commodity. It is the difference between shivering and not shivering, which feels like the more important historical angle. You set down your bundle and remove your outer cloak. It resists leaving your shoulders, stiff with damp at the hem. You hang it from a peg where rising warmth may reach it. Your tunic clings a little at the sleeves. Your fingers work slowly at the ties, because cold has made them clumsy, and tiredness has made them philosophical. Why are there so many knots in life? Why do laces become smaller precisely when you are sleepy? The keeper's household does not offer a private chamber in the modern sense. A younger person, perhaps a servant or relative, already sleeps near the far wall, rolled in a blanket, face turned away from the smoke. A wooden cradle hangs from a beam, though it is empty tonight. A chest stands beneath the window. At the foot of your bed frame, there is barely room for your boots. Shared sleeping was common in many medieval households, especially among ordinary people. Beds were expensive objects, rooms were limited, and warmth itself was valuable. Privacy, like sugar and glass windows, was something unevenly distributed. This can feel startling to modern listeners. We treat sleep as intensely personal. Our pillows, our preferred side of the bed, our small rituals involving phones we absolutely promise not to check. But here, in this loft above a bridge, sleep is social. You breathe with the household. You turn quietly so as not to wake others. You accept that a cough, a mutter, a snore, or the soft crying of a child might be part of the night's fabric. From below comes the muffled clink of the keeper, setting aside the last cup, then the scrape of the hearth being banked, then a lower voice, perhaps a prayer, perhaps merely a list of things to remember in the morning. The sounds rise through the floorboards, familiar and softened. You sit on the mattress, and it gives with a dry crackle. Straw presses through the ticking in small ridges. Not painful, exactly. More like being reminded by agriculture that luxury is a recent invention. You spread the blanket over your knees and feel the rough wool grip your damp clothes. Its warmth builds slowly, not with a sudden rush, but by trapping what little heat your body can offer and returning it without complaint. A curious custom belongs to sleeping spaces like this. In some homes, herbs such as lavender, rosemary, sweet woodruff, or even strongly scented rushes might be used to freshen rooms, discourage insects, or simply make the air less medieval, which is a phrase doing a lot of work. Wealthier households could scatter clean rushes more often, while poorer homes made do as they could. The idea of a perfectly fresh bedroom sealed from smoke, animals, damp and labour would have seemed rather ambitious here, pleasant, certainly suspiciously clean, perhaps. Experts remain divided on how comfortable ordinary medieval beds really were across region, class, and century, because inventories list objects but rarely describe the exact misery or coziness of lying on them. A noble bed with feather mattress, linen sheets, and curtains could be genuinely luxurious. A poor traveller's straw pallet could be alive with pokes, draughts, and livestock fragrances. Your bed tonight rests somewhere in the honest middle rough, smoky, warm enough, and deeply welcome. You lean back against the wall. The stone behind the plaster holds a coldness that no fire fully conquers. You pull the blanket higher. The roof timbers creak again. Outside, sleet brushes the tiles with a sound like handfuls of dry grain thrown across wood. The river continues its low speech underneath everything. Steadier now that you have heard it closely, it is not less powerful, but it is becoming familiar. Your eyes adjust to the dimness. The room is almost dark except for the glow climbing through cracks in the floorboards and the faintest pale line at the shutter. Shapes become gentle. The chest is a sleeping animal. The beam above is a black branch. Your own breath rises in little clouds when the draught reaches you. You think of all the people who must have slept above bridges keepers, apprentices, traders, widows running shops, children rocked by traffic, travellers lucky enough to find shelter. They slept while carts rolled past, while bells rang, while floods rose, while lovers whispered under cloaks, while watchmen stamped their cold feet outside. They trusted timber, stone, habit, and morning. You ease yourself fully onto the mattress. Straw rustles, the blanket settles over you. Your boots stand near the bed like two defeated creatures. The storm presses at the shutters, but the room holds. And here, near the rafters, in the smoky upper chamber of a medieval stone bridge house, you let your body become heavy, as if the bridge itself has agreed to carry not only your weight, but your waking thoughts as well. Your body has almost agreed to sleep when the smell from below changes its mind. It rises through the floorboards in slow, generous threads, onions softened in fat, peas or beans simmering until they surrender, a dark edge of smoke, and something earthy that might be turnip. Your stomach, which had been a tempting dignity, abandons the project. It tightens, then speaks in a small internal voice that says, yes, rest is lovely, but supper is also a respected historical institution. From below, the keeper calls softly, not loudly enough to startle the sleeping figure near the far wall, but clearly enough for you to understand there is food if you want it. You want it, very much. You wrap the blanket around your shoulders for one more moment, like a person pretending to be already asleep, then sigh and sit up. The mattress crackles beneath you. Straw clings to your sleeve. You find your boots, which are still damp but no longer icy, and work them onto your feet with the grim patience of a saint in uncomfortable footwear. Then you descend the ladder carefully, facing the rungs, one hand gripping the rail. The room below grows warmer with each step, firelight brightening around your legs, then your hands, then your face. The hearthroom has changed. Night has settled fully outside, and the storm now belongs to the walls, shutters, and roof. Inside, everything is closer. The table has been cleared of the told-dish and tally stick. A wooden bowl waits for you, dark with age and smooth from use. A spoon lies beside it, not a delicate spoon, not a polished courtly item, but a sturdy wooden tool shaped by work, washing, and many mouths over many years, the glamorous medieval spoon of destiny. The keeper ladles pottage into your bowl. It is thick, steaming, and humble, the colour of wet earth after rain. You can see barley, chopped roots, peas, and perhaps a few shreds of leek. A small piece of salt pork or bacon may have passed through the pot earlier and left behind its blessing. The smell is plain but comforting. You cradle the bowl in both hands and feel heat soaking into your fingers. Pottage was one of the dependable foundations of ordinary medieval food. Across much of Europe, people relied on grain-based porridges, vegetable stews, beans, peas, onions, cabbage, leeks, and whatever herbs, fat, dairy, fish, or meat they could afford or obtain. Bread mattered enormously too. But a pot that could simmer by the fire and stretch small ingredients into many portions was practical genius. Not glamorous, not Instagram ready, but on a night like this, it feels like civilization. You lift the spoon and taste. The first mouthful is hot enough to make you cautious. It warms the roof of your mouth, slides down and settles in your chest. The flavours are simple salt, smoke, onion sweetness, the grainy softness of barley, the faint bitterness of winter greens. There is no bright spice, no theatrical flourish. Nothing arranged in tiny decorative dots by a chef named something like Arno. There is only food doing its oldest job. It keeps you here. The keeper sits opposite you with their own bowl, a younger household member, awake now and wrapped in a blanket, joins quietly at the end of the table. Their hair is flattened from sleep. Their expression suggests they did not choose consciousness. But pottage has made a persuasive case. For a while. All of you eat without much speaking. The storm fills the silences. Outside, sleet strikes the shutters in bursts. The wind finds loose edges and makes them tremble. Somewhere beyond the door, a cartwheel grinds over wet stone, then fades. The house creaks, but it is a companionable creak now. Part of the meal, the roof keeps out the worst of the weather. The fire keeps the pot alive. The bridge keeps the river below you. A remarkable number of things must cooperate for one spoonful of supper. The keeper breaks a small loaf and passes you a piece. The bread is coarse, darker than fine white bread, with a firm crust and a sour tang. You dip it into the bowl, and it softens, gathering the broth. Bread in medieval society carried social meaning as well as nutrition. The wealthy could command finer white loaves made from well-sifted wheat flour. Poorer households often ate mixed-grain breads of rye, barley, oats, maslin, or whatever the region and purse allowed. Everyone understood the difference. Bread could announce status without saying a word, which is rude but efficient. You chew slowly. The crust resists, then gives. A tiny grit catches between your teeth, perhaps from stone-ground flour. Medieval bread did sometimes include traces of grit from millstones, and dentalware and skeletons can show the long conversation between teeth and grain, a charming thought as you eat. Honestly, nothing says bedtime relaxation like imagining your molars filing tiny complaints. The younger person tells you, in a drowsy voice, that a fishmonger came through earlier with a basket of eels and swore one had predicted the storm by refusing to stay in the bucket. The keeper snorts. Eels, apparently, are credited with many talents, few of them useful at tax time. In medieval Europe, eels were common food in many river and fen regions, and they were sometimes paid as rents or dues. There are English records of rents measured in thousands of eels. Thousands! Imagine being the official responsible for counting them. One suspects the eels were not helpful. You smile into your bowl, the room seems to soften. There is an unresolved question among food historians about how monotonous or varied ordinary medieval diets truly felt to the people eating them. Records can show ingredients, rents, purchases, and rules, but they do not always capture taste, craving, boredom, hunger, skill, or the joy of a hot meal in bad weather. A simple pottage might be dull in one house, fragrant in another, thin in a hard year, rich after a good market day. Tonight, because you are cold and tired, it tastes better than it has any right to. The keeper adds a little more broth to your bowl without asking. You accept with gratitude. This second portion is thinner, more liquid, and you drink some from the rim, letting steam warm your face. Your nose runs slightly from the heat. Very elegant, entirely human. The floor rushes give off their own smell as they dry near the hearth, grassy, dusty, faintly sour where old damp lingers underneath. Rushes scattered on the floors could help absorb moisture and dirt, though how clean they remained depended on the household, season, and diligence. Wealthier homes might refresh scented rushes more regularly. Poorer spaces could become, let us say, historically aromatic. The bridge house is not filthy, but it is alive with use. Boots, smoke, spilled ale, wet cloaks, cooking steam, and river damp all leave their signatures. You notice how little is wasted. The pot is scraped carefully. Breadcrumbs are gathered. Bones, if there are any, will flavour something else. Ashes have uses. Fat is precious. Salt matters. Even the firewood is arranged with thought. The driest pieces save for when flame must catch quickly. Medieval winter households lived by management, not abundance, and fops assembled, not assumed. The wind rises again, and the house gives a longer groan. For a heartbeat, all three of you look up. The beam above the hearth flexes with a soft complaint. Then nothing follows. The keeper returns to eating. So do you. This is perhaps the truest sign of trust, not that the house makes no noise, but that its people know which noises deserve worry. Your bowl empties. Your hands are warm now. Your eyelids have grown heavy in that deep, grain-fed way that comes after hot food and firelight. The younger person curls back into their blanket near the wall. The keeper covers the pot, banks the coals, and wipes the table with a cloth that has seen history and survived. You sit for one last moment, holding the taste of smoke and barley on your tongue, beyond the shutter, winter claws at stone, beneath the floor. The river pulls through the arches, but inside, supper has done what supper does best. It has made a small circle of warmth, wide enough for a keeper, a sleepy household, and one traveller who is beginning to feel less like a stranger. Then the ladder waits again, and the bed above seems less like rough straw and more like a promise. The ladder receives you a second time with the same narrow honesty. You climb slowly, carrying supper inside you like a small hearth of its own. Your limbs feel heavier now, but not from misery, from warmth, from barley and broth, from the deep medieval sedative known as finally not being freezing. Below, the keeper moves around the hearth with soft efficiency, drawing ash over the coals so the fire will sleep but not die. A good fire is not simply extinguished. It is banked, guarded, persuaded to remain useful until morning. Honestly, many of us could benefit from such treatment. When you reach the upper room, the air is dim and smoky. The sleeping figure near the wall has turned over and vanished deeper into their blanket. The cradle hanging from the beam moves slightly in the draught. Though no child lies inside it, it gives a faint wooden creak, a lonely little sound that rises and falls with the wind. You stand still, listening. The storm has shifted. It no longer throws hard sleet in angry bursts. Now it presses cold steadily against the house, as if leaning its full shoulder into the walls. The window shutters tap and scrape. A thin thread of air enters through the gap between wood and frame and draws across your face. It smells of rain, river fog, and distant wet thatch. You move to the window and lay your fingers on the shutter bar. The wood is cold, rough, and damp where moisture has crept through. The keeper has already fastened it, but the latch trembles under each gust. Outside, the bridge road is mostly dark. Through a sliver in the shutters, you see only a slice of lantern light trembling somewhere across the way, and beyond it, the faint grey shape of the parapet. The river below is invisible, but it announces itself without modesty. Medieval windows were not the cheerful wide panes you might picture in a cosy cottage painting. In ordinary homes, openings were often small, partly because glass was costly, partly because walls needed strength, and partly because winter had a personal vendetta against comfort. Shutters were essential. Some households used oiled cloth, wooden lattices, horn panels, or parchment treated to admit a little light while keeping out at least some weather. Glazed windows existed, especially in churches, wealthy houses, and later urban settings, but for many people, a window was a controlled problem rather than a view. You test the shutter again, it holds, that is the main thing. The room has two tiny openings, one toward the roadway and one angled toward the river. Both are closed, but neither is perfectly sealed. Medieval carpentry is admirable, but the wind is extremely committed. It finds cracks you cannot see and slips through them with delicate cruelty. One draught touches your ankles, another combs the back of your neck. You begin to understand why bed curtains, wall hangings, and heavy textiles mattered so much in colder households. They did not merely decorate a room, they trapped warmth, softened drafts, and turned a hostile chamber into something more survivable. In richer homes, beds might be surrounded by curtains that created a smaller chamber inside the room. Tapestries and hangings could block cold from stone walls and display wealth at the same time, which is convenient. Nothing says prosperity like being slightly less frozen than your neighbours. In the bridge house, there are no grand tapestries, only a hanging cloth nailed along the coldest wall and a spare cloak draped near the bedstead. Practical, smoke-scented, slightly stiff, wonderful. You tug the hanging cloth closer where it has come loose from one peg. It is rough wool, patched and faded, but it breaks the draught enough to matter. Your fingers brush the stone behind it, and the chill seems almost wet. The wall has stored the whole day's storm and is now thoughtfully giving it back. A small object hangs near the window, a twist of dried herbs tied with thread. Rosemary perhaps, or rue, or something gathered in summer and kept because it smelled clean, or because someone believed it helped. Ordinary medieval households often mixed practical habits with protective ones. A herb bundle might freshen air, discourage insects a little, serve as medicine, or simply reassure the person who tied it there. The boundary between remedy, charm, and housekeeping was not always sharp. Modern people may smile at that, then immediately place Himalayan salt lamps beside Wi-Fi routers, so let us be gentle. You lean closer and catch a faint scent beneath the smoke. Dry, green, almost sharp. It reminds you that summer once existed, that fields were warm, that the river, now black and swollen, once flashed in sunlight under swallows. Winter narrows the world, but little stored things widen it again. There is some disagreement among specialists about how dark ordinary medieval interiors truly were, since surviving buildings, written descriptions, archaeological traces, and artistic images each tell only part of the story. A room might be gloomy by modern standards, yes, but people also arranged work around daylight, opened shutters when weather allowed, de-pale plaster to reflect light, and knew the habits of their own spaces intimately. You, however, are not doing embroidery at noon. You're standing in a bridge house loft during a winter storm. So the answer tonight is dark. Very dark. Historically dark, the sort of dark that makes a chest look like a crouching boar. You return to the bed and sit. Straw whispers under you. The blanket waits, patient and rough. Before lying down, you take off your boots again and set them close. Toes angled toward the faint warmth rising from below. Your socks, or footcloths, are still damp at the edges. You peel them away with a small grimace and stretch your toes. They look pale and slightly resentful. You cannot blame them. The shutter gives another tap. You imagine the storm outside in fragments, sleet collecting in the joints between stones, water dripping from signboards, a night watchman ducking his chin into his collar, a stray dog pressed under an archway, the river swallowing every sound that falls from the bridge. The house around you acts as a filter. It turns weather into rhythm, tap, hiss, creak, murmur, then the soft breath of the sleeping person across the room. Cold is not merely temperature here. It is an organizing force. It decides where people sit when they work, how they dress, what they eat, how they sleep, and how quickly they forgive the smell of smoke. It gathers people near fires and under shared blankets. It makes small luxuries enormous dry wool, hot broth, a shutter that closes, a wall hanging that blocks one narrow blade of wind. You pull the blanket around your shoulders and lie back. The wool scratches your chin. Your head rests on a small stuffed pad that might contain straw. Wool scraps, or feathers if fortune has been unusually generous. It is not luxurious, but it lifts your head enough. The bed smells of dried grass, wool oil, ash, and many previous nights. The drafts continue their tiny invasions, but the blanket begins to win. Warmth forms under the covers in a pocket around your knees, then your ribs, then your hands tucked beneath your arms. Your breathing slows. The room dims further as the last glow from below fades between the floorboards. The shutter taps once more, then rests. You do not imagine the window as a weakness now. It is part of the bargain. A little light by day, a little cold by night. A house must breathe, and so must you, outside. Winter drags its fingers along the bridge stones. Inside, behind wood, wool, smoke, and habit, you settle into the old human art of keeping warm. Keeping warm becomes easier once you stop expecting the room to become warm. That is the secret, perhaps. You no longer wait for the loft to transform into a modern bedroom with sealed windows, silent walls, and a mattress designed by people who use phrases like sleep technology. Instead, you accept the bridge house on its own terms. The air is cold near your nose, the blanket is warm around your body. The straw beneath you shifts whenever you breathe. The river speaks below. Somewhere in the dark, another sleeper makes a small clicking sound with their tongue, then sighs as if disagreeing with a dream. You drift close to sleep. Then footsteps pass outside the shutter, not directly beside your bed, but near enough that the boards and stones carry them into the room. One pair of feet, then another, then the soft clop of a horse walking carefully over wet stone. A voice mutters, another answers, the words blur, but the tones are clear, tired, cold, irritated, and trying not to sound afraid. You open your eyes. The bridge has not gone to sleep. Of course it has not. A bridge is a promise between two banks, and promises are inconveniently active at all hours. Even after market stalls close and respectable households bank their fires. Someone still needs to cross. A messenger with bad news, a servant sent for a midwife, a monk returning late, a merchant too stubborn to wait until morning, a local man who forgot something on the far side and is now regretting several decisions. The footsteps fade, and the room settles again. Yet now your mind follows the road outside. The bridge is narrow, lined with structures that lean inward, making the roadway feel like a stone throat. By day, the place would be packed with bodies and trade. Shops might open directly onto the passage, their shutters lowered into counters. A woman could sell bread from one side. A glove maker could bargain from another. A pilgrim might pause for a badge, and a carter behind all of them would shout because his horse is not impressed by urban commerce. Medieval bridges often became commercial zones because they captured movement. Anyone who crossed might buy food, tools, candles, ribbons, ale, fish, or a blessing. In towns where walls restricted space, bridge plots could be valuable, even awkward ones. Shopkeepers tolerated damp, noise, and danger because customers passed their doors whether they planned to or not. A bridge shop had the great advantage of unavoidable foot traffic, which sounds like a modern business seminar, except with more mud and fewer slides. You hear another noise outside, a door opens somewhere along the bridge row. Hinges complain, someone empties a small bucket or basin into the weather with a practice splash. You decide not to identify the contents. History is about knowing when not to investigate. Then comes a brief exchange, clearer this time. A woman's voice calls across the roadway, asking whether the watch has passed. A man answers that he saw the lantern near the chapel end. The woman says something about a loose shutter. The man tells her to tie it before it flies into the river. She replies that he may come tie it himself if he is so wise. The door closes. The bridge resumes its muffled patience. You smile in the dark. This is the social world you entered when the keeper unbarred the door. Not a solitary stone shelter, but a little neighbourhood suspended over moving water. People know one another by footsteps, coughs, trade cries, family quarrels, and the smell of each hearth. Privacy is thin. Sound travels through timber and stone. A bridge house is never fully alone, even when the storm wraps it in darkness. There is an odd story told in some medieval towns about bridge residents becoming excellent judges of strangers by listening rather than looking. A person's pace, the drag of a cart, the jangle of harness, even the way someone knocked at a shutter could signal whether they were local, wealthy, desperate, drunk, or merely lost. It sounds fanciful, but anyone who has recognized a neighbor by footsteps in a hallway knows the skill is real enough. Humans are wonderfully nosy instruments. The bridge, meanwhile, gathers more than commerce. It gathers pilgrims. You imagine them in rough cloaks, carrying staffs, small badges pinned to hats or capes, maybe bound for a shrine whose name has travelled farther than most people ever will. Pilgrimage was a major feature of medieval religious and social life, drawing people across regions towards saints' shrines, relics, holy wells, and great churches. Some went for devotion, some for healing, some for penance, some because travel offered a rare change of scenery and, let us be honest, possibly better gossip. A pilgrim crossing in this storm might pause beneath an overhang, stamping ice from shoes, touching a badge shaped like a scallop shell, a saint or a little flask. They might ask the bridge keeper whether the road beyond is passable. They might trade news from upriver, a market delayed, a mill damaged, a lord's men collecting dues, a child born during the storm, a cow found exactly where no cow should be. News moves like water, only louder. From below, the keeper stirs. You hear them cough, then settle again, even asleep. They are part of the bridge's attention. The keys hang nearby. The toll chest is shut. The door is barred, but the house remains ready to wake. There is continuing uncertainty among historians over how much medieval urban neighbours relied on formal rules compared with informal habits when sharing cramped spaces like bridges. Lanes and market rows. Town courts recorded disputes over drains, signs, walls, waste, noise, animals, and encroachments, which suggests people complained with admirable energy. Yet daily life also depended on unwritten understandings: who could borrow a ladder, who watched whose child, who helped pull a cart free, who pretended not to hear an argument after dark. Law mattered. So did tolerance. So did fatigue. The wind shifts, and for a moment it carries a smell through the shutter crack from another house hot fat. Perhaps, or a candle just snuffed, mixed with damp ash. Then it is gone. You wonder how many separate suppers have been cooked along this bridge tonight. How many bowls scraped clean, how many blankets pulled tight, how many small bargains made with cold. A door opens again. This time, a man sings 2 lines under his breath while crossing. Not loudly, not well, but with bravery. The tune lifts and breaks in the wind. Perhaps he is a trader returning late from an alehouse. Perhaps he sings because the dark feels less deep when filled with a human sound. His song fades toward the far gate, swallowed by the road beyond. You turn onto your side, the bed rustles. Your cheek finds a slightly softer part of the pillow, a discovery worthy of gratitude. The shutter continues to pulse in the wind, but now the sounds outside feel less like interruptions and more like neighbours in the same dream. The bridge has its own nightlife, modest and weather-beaten. Lanterns carried close to the chest, shopkeepers tying cords across shutters, pilgrims whispering prayers, watchmen passing with staffs, horses snorting steam, someone laughing too loudly, then being hushed, someone waking to check a roof leak, someone pausing at the parapet to listen to the floodwater and wondering whether morning will bring trouble. You lie there above it all, not separate from it, but folded into it. The bridge carries people across the river, and tonight it also carries their small sounds into your sleep. Every footstep says the world continues. Every distant voice says you are not alone. Every creak in the stone says this little suspended street, damp and crowded and impossibly alive, is holding for one more winter night. The world continues in footsteps, then in bells. At first, the sound is so faint that you mistake it for the wind finding a new hollow under the eaves. A low note rolls through the storm, soft around the edges, blurred by rain and distance. Then it comes again, clearer this time. A bell, not large enough to shake the whole town, not grand enough to summon a cathedral chapter or terrify pigeons into theological reflection, but steady, human, and near. It drifts from the far end of the bridge, where a small chapel stands beside the roadway, tucked between stone, traffic, and weather. You cannot see it from the bed, but you imagine its little window glowing, its roof slick with sleet, its doorway shadowed by the marks of many hands. The bell rings once more. The note passes through shutters, wool, straw, and your half-dreaming mind. It settles somewhere behind your ribs. A bridge chapel is not strange in this world. Crossings were dangerous places, and medieval people knew it. Rivers could flood, bridges could fail, wheels could break. Thieves could wait near lonely roads, and journeys, even ordinary ones, had a way of becoming dramatic without asking permission. A chapel on or near a bridge offered prayer for travellers, gratitude for safe passage, and sometimes a way to collect alms for repairs. Sacred space and public infrastructure stood side by side, because keeping souls and stonework in good order could be part of the same civic project. You lie still and listen. The bell does not ring wildly. It marks the hour, perhaps, or a night office, or a simple call from someone awake in the chapel in a medieval town. Bells shaped time long before most people carried clocks. They called people to prayer. Work, curfew, market, alarm, death, feast, danger, and sometimes to meetings where everyone pretended to enjoy civic responsibility. Time was heard, not watched. It arrived in metal notes thrown across rooftops and rivers. Below you, the keeper shifts in sleep. Perhaps the bell has entered their dreams. Perhaps it is so familiar they no longer hear it unless it rings wrongly. That, too, is a kind of knowledge. The difference between ordinary bells and alarming bells, between the hour and a fire, between prayer and panic. The note fades, and the storm fills the space after it. You close your eyes again, and the chapel forms itself in your imagination. Small stone walls, a narrow altar, a painted image of a saint, colours dim in lamplight, a candle guttering before a figure who has seen generations of damp travellers mumble requests. Please let the road be safe. Please let the river fall. Please let my horse stop limping. Please let the toll-keeper be reasonable. A very holy and ambitious list. Medieval bridge chapels often served practical and devotional purposes at once. Some were dedicated to saints associated with travel, protection, or local tradition. Others were linked to guilds, hospitals, or charitable foundations in some places. Offerings made by travellers helped support the bridge itself. The old phrase, bridge work, could have religious meaning, since maintaining a bridge was sometimes treated as a charitable act. It is a pleasing thought. Really, every stone repaired might count as mercy made visible. Then again, if you were the mason working in icy rain, mercy probably felt heavy and inconvenient. Another small sound comes from outside, a soft clatter of a latch. Someone crosses near the chapel and pauses. You imagine them turning toward the door, maybe bowing the head, maybe touching fingers to forehead and chest. Not every traveller was devout in the same way. Of course, some prayed deeply, some performed habits learned in childhood, some hurried past, muttering only because everyone mutters in terrible weather. But the chapel offered a pause, and pauses matter. A curious belief sometimes attached to bells themselves. People thought consecrated bells could drive away storms, demons, or harmful forces. Bell inscriptions might ask the bell to praise God, protect the living, mourn the dead, or scatter thunder. There are accounts from later medieval and early modern Europe of bells being rung against storms, which seems bold, considering lightning has a very strong feelings about tall towers. Still, the belief tells you something tender sound could be imagined as protection, ringing outward into danger. Tonight, the little bell cannot stop the storm, it cannot lower the river, it cannot seal the shutter cracks or dry your socks, but it changes the darkness, it gives the night a centre. The bridge house feels different when you think of the chapel nearby, less like a precarious pile of damp rooms, more like part of a moral landscape. A crossing watched by eyes painted on wood, guarded by prayers, maintained by hands, fees, duty, fear, and hope. Medieval towns were not divided neatly into the practical over here and the spiritual over there. A market could stand beside a church. A toll could fund a chapel. A prayer could accompany a business deal. A bridge could carry both carts and souls, which is efficient if slightly crowded. Experts have not reached full agreement on how to interpret the religious life of ordinary medieval travellers, especially when evidence comes mostly from wills. Miracle stories, church records, badges, and objects rather than private thoughts. Was a quick prayer at a bridge chapel a sign of deep devotion, routine habit, social expectation, or all three folded together? Your own drowsy answer is simple and probably academically insufficient when the river is high and the wind is cruel. One accepts help in any form available. The bell sounds again. This time you do not open your eyes, you let the note pass through you. It seems to mingle with the river's murmur. The two sounds meeting somewhere below the bedwater, moving horizontally. Bronze ringing outward. Both older than your fears, the river says. All things pass, the bell says. Be remembered while passing. Rather dramatic, perhaps, for a cold traveller under a scratchy blanket. But bedtime does invite philosophy. You think of people who may have entered that chapel by day, a merchant counting profits and pretending not to worry about thieves on the road, a woman carrying wax as an offering after a child recovered from fever, a pilgrim buying a small badge, a bridge worker with mortar under his nails, a widow asking for safe passage for a son apprenticed in another town, a child fascinated by the bell rope and absolutely not trusted near it. The storm rubs against the roof, the cradle creaks, the sleeper near the wall makes a soft nasal sound, then grows quiet again. Your blanket has trapped enough warmth now that your shoulders loosen. The cold at your nose remains, but it feels distant, like news from another county. You imagine the chapel candle burning lower. Wax softens, runs, hardens in little ridges. Smoke darkens the air above the flame. Perhaps a caretaker checks the door before sleep. Perhaps the bell rope hangs still. Perhaps the saint's painted face, calm and slightly severe, looks out over an empty room while the bridge vibrates faintly with water and wind. The bell's last note fades completely, yet something of it remains in the house. The keeper's keys below, the toll chest, the shutter bar, the pottage pot, the sleeping loft, the arch under the road, the chapel near the crossing. All these ordinary things seem joined by the same quiet purpose to help fragile people pass through a dangerous world without being entirely alone. And so you lie still in the upper room, listening for the next sound, while the river moves under the stones and the unseen chapel keeps its small watch at the edge of sleep. The chapel keeps its small watch, and the river keeps its larger one. You hear it more clearly now, perhaps because the bell has faded and left a hollow space behind. The water below does not rush evenly. It surges, draws back, presses forward again. It is not the cheerful sound of a summer stream over stones. It is heavier than that, swollen with rain from fields, lanes, ditches, mill ponds, and hills you cannot see from this bed. Every drop has travelled through darkness to gather beneath you. The keeper's words return to you rising since noon. You turn carefully under the blanket. Straw crackles like tiny dry bones. Though we are keeping things cosy, so let us imagine them as twigs. Your eyes open to the shadowed room. The shutter is a dark rectangle. The cloth hanging on the wall stirs faintly. The sleeping person near the far side is hidden, except for a shape of blanket and one loose hand resting on the floorboards. Another dull knock sounds from below. Driftwood, perhaps. A branch touching a pier. The sound is not loud, but it travels up through stone and timber into your back. You picture the lower chamber again. The lantern light. The cold opening. The mark scratched into the wall. Flood marks. Not dramatic decorations, memory recorded at shoulder height. The highest mark bothers you. There is something humbling about a line on stone that says, once. The water came here, not in a poem, not in a warning from an anxious aunt. Here, to this exact level, it climbed steps, swallowed thresholds, soaked barrels, lifted rushes, drowned fires, and left mud in the corners. A line like that is a history book written by the river, and the river is not known for neat handwriting. Flooding was a persistent danger for medieval river towns. Bridges narrowed channels, piers caught debris, mills altered currents, and winter storms or sudden thaws could turn familiar water into force. Towns depended on rivers for trade, fishing, transport, milling, and waste removal, but the same rivers regularly damaged banks, bridges, quays, houses, and fields. Medieval civic records from various towns mention repairs after floods, payments to workers, replacement of timbers, and efforts to clear obstructions. In other words, living near water was useful, profitable, and occasionally a deeply soggy administrative crisis. A gust presses the shutter. The latch taps once. You remember the keeper describing ice plates coming downstream. The image grows in your mind, not clear blue ice from a picture book, but dirty grey slabs, thick at the edges, carrying twigs and reed stems, grinding against stone. Men with poles leaning from the bridge, shouting over the roar. Someone ringing a bell because bells are excellent when humans require organised alarm. Women pulling goods to upper rooms. Children ordered to stay away from the parapet, which naturally makes the parapet the most interesting place in the universe. The bridge survives by enduring events like that again and again, not by being untouched, by being repaired. In the lower chamber, those flood marks must be known to the household the way some families know the heights of children marked on a doorframe. Here is the water from the year of the thaw. Here is the line from the storm after Martinmas. Here is the stain from the flood that spoiled 3 sacks of grain and left a fish under the bench. A fish under the bench would, to be fair, be memorable. There are old European tales of floods leaving strange gifts behind: fish in cellars, boats in fields, drowned bells heard under water, and river stones said to shift by moonlight. Some communities treated flood debris with a mixture of practicality and superstition. A washed-up log might become firewood, a warning, or a sign, depending on who found it and how dramatic they were feeling. People have always been talented at turning weather into meaning. The river throws a branch at your door, and suddenly everyone has a theory. Tonight, though, theory feels less urgent than sound. Another knock below, then scraping. You hold still. The scraping fades. The water resumes its layered pushing. The house does not move, not in any alarming way. The bridge holds, yet your body is awake now, tuned to the lowest notes. You understand why the keeper sleeps with one ear open. Floods do not always announce themselves politely. Sometimes they rise by inches while people dream. There is still plenty of uncertainty among medieval environmental historians about how communities perceived long-term river change before modern instruments and systematic measurements. Did people think mainly in terms of memorable disasters, local seasons, divine judgment, practical maintenance, or inherited river lore? Written records often preserve the aftermath: a payment, a complaint, a repair, a damaged mill. They rarely preserve the exact feeling of lying awake while the water climbs in the dark. But you are close to that feeling now, wrapped in wool, listening. You sit up slowly. The air bites your face as the blanket falls from your shoulders. You wait, partly from caution and partly because getting out of bed is a historic burden shared across all ages. Then you swing your feet to the floor. The boards are cold. Your toes protest in a language older than Latin. You move toward the shutter facing the river. You do not open it fully. That would invite sleet, wind, and a lecture from common sense. Instead, you ease one edge just enough to peer through a narrow crack. The night outside is grey-black, not empty. Cloud hangs low. Sleet moves in slanted threads through dim lantern glow from the bridge. The parapet is slick, glistening. Beyond it, the river is a darkness with motion in it. You cannot see its surface clearly, but you can see pale flashes where foam turns, and you can hear it striking the piers with a deep repeating. The water is high, not at the roadway, not near your window, not disaster, not yet, but high enough that the river seems less below the bridge than gathered around it. Waiting to test every stone, you close the shutter carefully and fasten the bar. The room is colder for the brief opening. The sleeping figure mutters and pulls their blanket tighter. You whisper an apology nobody hears. When you return to the bed, the straw has cooled. You tuck yourself back under the wool and begin the slow work of rebuilding warmth. It takes patience, first your knees, then your hands, then the curve of your back. You breathe into the blanket and smell wool, smoke, and the faint, dry scent of straw. The flood marks remain in your thoughts, but they no longer feel only frightening, they also testify to survival. The water rose. Yes, it left stains, it damaged things, people cleaned, cursed, counted losses, repaired mortar, dried tools, relayed rushes, and kept living above the river. The marks are not just warnings, they are proof that morning came afterward. Below, perhaps, the keeper wakes briefly. You hear a footstep, a pause. Maybe they are listening too. Maybe they open the lower door, check the sound, judge the level by ear and habit, then return to their place near the hearth. No alarm follows, no shout, no bell. The storm continues, but a little of its threat softens. You let the rhythm of the water become steady again, not harmless, but known. The bridge has met winter floods before. The stones carry old stains like memories. The household sleeps above them because fear cannot be allowed to have the whole night. It may sit in the corner, certainly. It may clear its throat now and then, but it does not get the bed. And gradually, beneath the scratch of sleet and the murmur of high water, your breathing slows once more, rising and falling with the river you cannot command, only hear. Your breathing slows, but the night is not finished with you. A small wet chill creeps from your sleeves toward your elbows, reminding you that even if your body is warmed, your clothes have not entirely joined the movement. The cloak on its peg below has been steaming for some time, giving up the road by degrees. Your tunic is drier than it was, but damp remains in the seams, cuffs, and hem, those sneaky little kingdoms of discomfort. Your hose or leg wrappings cling faintly at the knees. Your foot clothes, set near the bed, possess the cold limpness of defeated cabbage. There is no pretending now, if you sleep in every damp layer, the night will take back much of the warmth supper gave you. So you sit up again, slowly, as if negotiating with gravity. The loft air brushes your face, cold and smoke-tinged. You gather the damp footcloths and your outer things, then descend the ladder with the careful movements of a person who is sleepy, full of pottage, and not interested in becoming a cautionary tale. Below, the hearthroom is dimmer than before. The fire has been banked under ash, but a red glow lives at its centre. The keeper is awake after all, seated low near the hearth, wrapped in a cloak, listening. Their face turns toward you in the faint light. You whisper that your clothing is still wet. They nod as if this is not a surprise, not an inconvenience, simply one more winter fact. They stir the coals with an iron rod. The ash shifts, orange light opens like an eye. A small flame licks along the edge of a charred stick, then catches. Warmth rises, modest but real. You kneel beside the hearth and hold out your footcloths at a safe distance. Steam lifts from them in ghostly ribbons. The smell is immediate and intimate wet wool, old leather, smoke, and feet that have had a difficult evening, relaxing. Perhaps not in a scented candle way, historically honest, very much so. Medieval clothing was not a wardrobe of endless changes for ordinary people. Linen undergarments could be washed more often than outer woolens, because linen tolerated laundering better and sat next to the skin. Wool outer garments resisted dirt and shed some water, but they were not casually scrubbed every day. Leather shoes needed drying with care, since too much heat could make them stiff, cracked, and tragic. Clothing represented labour, money, time, and household skill. You did not fling garments into a machine and then forget them until they smelled suspicious. You managed them, aired them, brushed them, patched them, and prayed the weather cooperated. The keeper gestures to a wooden frame near the wall. It is not grand, only a few rods set between uprights, but garments can be draped across it to dry in the rising warmth. Your cloak is already there, hung with the inside facing the heat. Droplets cling to the hem. The wool gives off a thick animal scent. The lanolin warmth of sheep folded into human use. You spread your foot cloths along the lowest rod, then you ease off your damp outer tunic and arrange it beside them, keeping your underlayer on for decency and warmth. The air touches your arms and raises goose flesh. The keeper politely looks at the fire, because medieval manners, when they exist, often involve pretending not to notice practical awkwardness. A second smell joins the other's damp linen, cleaner, sharper, more plant-like than wool. Linen comes from flax, a plant that had to be pulled, retted, broken, scutched, heckled, spun, and woven before it became cloth. That is a great deal of effort for something you may currently be using to keep your elbows from freezing. The long process made linen valuable, and households took care of it. In many places, women's work in spinning, laundering, mending, and managing textiles formed one of the quiet foundations of daily survival, not background, foundation. The keeper lifts one of your shoes, turns it over, and raises an eyebrow at the mud packed along the sole. You apologize with your face, which is a universally understood language. They scrape the worst of it away with a small wooden tool and set the shoes near the hearth, not too close. You watch the leather darken as warmth reaches it. Steam rises from the seams, the smell deepens tannin, mud, smoke, and road. Medieval leather working involved hides treated with plant tannins, oils, fats, smoke, and other substances depending on region and craft. Shoes were usually turned or stitched in ways that varied over time, and repairs were common. A worn sole might be patched, a strap replaced. A shoe was not disposable, because the past had not yet invented the emotional emptiness of cheap fast fashion. From somewhere near the wall comes a tiny rustle. You glance over, but see only stacked rushes and a basket. The keeper notices and shrugs. The house has small residents, the shrug says. This is their weather too. There are records and archaeological finds that reveal surprisingly personal details about medieval textile habits: worn seams, patched elbows, darned stockings, reused cloth, pins lost in floors, and fragments of fabric preserved in damp ground. But one question remains difficult to settle fully. How clean did ordinary people feel by their own standards? Compared with ours, cleanliness was not absent, despite the popular cartoon version of the Middle Ages as one long mud bath. People washed hands, faces, linens, tools, vessels, and bodies, when water, fuel, time, privacy, and custom allowed. Yet smoke, labour, animals, and weather meant clean lived in a different sensory world. Tonight, dry matters more than pristine. You hold your hands over the fire, palms down, then turn them. The skin tightens as heat reaches it. The keeper passes you a small cloth and points to your sleeves, suggesting you squeeze the edges rather than leave them to drip. You obey. Water darkens the cloth. A droplet falls onto hot stone and vanishes with a tiny hiss. The sound is oddly satisfying. Above you, a beam creaks. Outside, the storm has softened again, but the river remains full. You imagine your clothes absorbing the character of this house as they dry smoke from the hearth. Salt from your skin, damp from the river, ash from the air, a faint trace of pottage. Tomorrow, when you put them on, you will carry the bridge with you. Nobody will call it perfume. They will be wrong to miss the poetry, but not wrong about the smell. The keeper tells you, in a low voice, that in winter some travellers arrive so wet they must sleep wrapped in borrowed sacking while their clothes hang near the fire. Others refuse to remove wet garments, then wake colder and meaner than before. Pride, they say, does not dry wool. This is excellent advice. It should be embroidered somewhere. You think of the hands that made every layer you wear. Someone spun the thread. Someone wove the cloth. Someone cut and stitched the tunic. Someone sheared sheep, retted flax, tanned leather, carved toggles, twisted cords. Your clothing is a crowd of invisible labour, warmed now by a fire inside a bridge house above a winter river. History is not only kings and battles. Sometimes it is a damp sock steaming on a rod while a tired keeper pokes ash with an iron. A faint smile touches your mouth. Your footcloths begin to feel merely damp rather than soaked. Your tunic releases less steam. The cloak still needs time, but it hangs with the heavy patience of wool. You shift the garments a little farther from the flame, wary of scorching. Warmth is medicine until it becomes disaster. The keeper settles back on their stool. You remain crouched near the hearth, wrapped in the borrowed blanket from the loft, watching steam vanish into smoke. The room is quiet enough now that every little sound has depth. The whisper of drying cloth, the click of a cooling pottery, the soft collapse of a coal, the far water moving under the stones. Eventually, you gather what can return upstairs and leave the rest to the hearth's slow work. The keeper nods, eyes half closed. You climb again, lighter without the damp outer layer, and slip back beneath the wool blanket. Your skin misses the fire for a moment, then begins to warm itself. Below, your clothes dry in smoke. Above, your body loosens into the straw. The house holds both, tending you in its rough, smoky way. And the storm outside seems a little less able to reach the tender centre of the night. The tender centre of the night has whiskers. You notice this just as sleep begins to gather again, soft around the edges of your thoughts. A faint rustle comes from the shadow near the storage baskets. Not the good kind of rustle, if rustles can be morally ranked. This one is small, quick, secretive, and very sure of itself. Your eyes open. The loft remains almost entirely dark. The shutter is a black square. The hanging cloth barely moves. The other sleeper is still wrapped in their blanket, unaware or wisely pretending to be. You listen, holding your breath. There it is again, a scratch, a pause, tiny patter along the wall, a rat, perhaps, or a mouse with confidence. You remind yourself that you are in a medieval bridge house full of grain sacks, straw bedding, crumbs, rushes, damp corners, and access to riverside traffic. In other words, from a rodent perspective, this is not a house. This is a luxury resort with rustic charm and excellent transport links. You're merely an enormous and convenient guest. Something moves behind a basket. You do not see it clearly, but you hear the quick brush of a small body. Your blanket rises to your chin by instinct, very brave, very dignified. Rodents were familiar companions in medieval towns, though not welcome ones. Grain storage, markets, stables, kitchens, riverbanks, and crowded housing created excellent conditions for mice and rats, the black rat, often associated with ships, ports, and urban environments. Spread through many parts of Europe in antiquity and the medieval period, people trapped, chased, cursed, and tolerated them according to need and ability. Perfect control was unlikely. The past did not have sealed plastic bins, steel wool, or that one friend who claims peppermint oil fixes everything. From below comes another sound, soft but sharper, a low feline chirp. The house cat is awake. You had not seen it earlier. Or perhaps you had mistaken it for folded cloth near the hearth. Now you hear paws on the ladder, quiet as secrets. A shape slips into the loft, darker than the dark, moving with liquid certainty. The cat pauses at the top, tail low, ears forward. It does not look at you. You are not important. The true business of the night has begun. The scratch near the basket stops. The cat advances. You suddenly understand household politics at an ancient level. Humans may hold keys, count tolls, and repair arches, but in the matter of small intruders, another official has jurisdiction. The cat places one paw before another. Silent on the boards, its body lowers, the room seems to tighten around it. Medieval cats had a complicated reputation. They were useful for controlling vermin, especially around food stores, but they also attracted suspicion, affection, irritation, and folklore in varying measures. Some manuscript illuminations show cats doing exactly what cats do best: hunting mice, stealing food, ignoring human plans, and looking faintly superior. There are even medieval marginal images where cats appear in comic scenes, because apparently no century has resisted turning cats into content. The internet did not invent this. It merely industrialized it. The rustle resumes, but only for half a second. The cat springs. There is a brief thump, a skitter, a muffled scramble behind the basket, then a silence so complete that even the river seems to pause out of respect. You do not know the outcome. The cat emerges after a moment with the proud, mysterious air of a professional whose report is confidential. It sits near the foot of your bed and begins washing one paw. That, you feel, answers nothing and everything. You relax by degrees. The blanket lowers from your chin to your chest. The cat looks at you once, eyes catching the faint glow from below, greenish and remote. It has accepted your presence as temporary furniture. This is generous, probably. A small household like this depends on more than human labour. Cats keep the watch into corners. Dogs may guard doors, warn of strangers, or curl under benches for warmth. Chickens, if kept nearby or in a yard off the bridge, provide eggs and chaos. Horses and mules move goods. Geese are alarming security devices with feathers. Animals are not background decoration. They are working participants in daily life, though their contracts are clear and their attitudes mixed. The bridge outside has its own animal sounds too. A horse snorts in the roadway, breath steaming in the cold. Harness rings faintly, somewhere lower, perhaps near the river steps. A dog barks twice and then decides the matter is beneath him. The bridge neighbourhood breathes through creatures as much as people. Odd beliefs gathered around household protection. Some people kept charms, blessed objects, herbs, written prayers, or concealed items in walls and thresholds to guard against misfortune. Cats themselves could be admired as useful hunters, but also feared in certain contexts, especially when linked by rumour to witches or uncanny night wandering. That suspicion grew in different ways across regions and later centuries, but even in the medieval imagination, animals could carry meanings beyond their practical roles. A black cat near the hearth might be comfort, omen, worker, nuisance, or all four before breakfast. The cat at your feet licks its shoulder with theatrical calm. You think of the herb bundle by the shutter, the old shoes supposedly hidden in walls, the chapel bell near the bridge, the flood marks below, the keys at the keeper's belt. Protection here is layered. Some of it is physical stone arches, shutter bars, cats, locks, rope, fire. Some of it is spiritual or symbolic prayers, bells, saints, charms, habits, medieval life, especially in a place exposed to water and weather. Did not always draw a sharp line between these. If a thing might help or had helped once, or made the heart less afraid, it earned a place. Researchers still wrestle with how to separate practical pest control from symbolic animal beliefs in medieval sources, because texts often exaggerate. Art jokes, archaeology stays silent, and ordinary household experience rarely writes itself down. Was the cat cherished, merely tolerated, feared, or name something ridiculous like Softfoot. The evidence varies. Tonight, the answer is simple. The cat is necessary, and the cat knows it. Another scratch comes from the lower wall. The cat freezes. You freeze too, because apparently you now serve in the rodent watch. The sound does not repeat. After several long breaths, the cat settles again. Though one ear remains turned toward the basket, it has the gift of appearing asleep while missing nothing. The keeper would approve. You shift your feet carefully so as not to disturb it. The straw mattress complains. The cat flicks its tail once, a polite threat. You stop moving. The river continues below, unconcerned with small hunts above it. Water, rats, cats, humans, bells, tolls, pottage. All of it layered in the bridge house like the smells in the room. Smoke in the beams, damp in the stone and wool in the blanket, straw under your back, animal warmth near your feet. This is not the spotless calm of a modern retreat, it is a living calm, patched, breathing, alert. You find, to your surprise, that the cat's presence makes the room feel safer. Not because it could fight the storm or lower the river. Obviously, it would not even consider such a task without excellent compensation, but it belongs here. It knows the cracks, the baskets, the noises worth noticing. It is another mind awake in the dark. Your eyelids grow heavy again. The cat curls at the foot of the bed, forming a tight comma of warmth. The other sleeper breathes softly. The shutter taps once, then rests, somewhere below. Your clothes continue drying near the embers, somewhere under the stones. The river slides through the arches, carrying branches, cold moonless water, and perhaps the reflections of houses above it. You let the little animal politics of the house fade into the rhythm of the night. The cat watches, the bridge holds, the rats, for now, reconsider their ambitions, and you, tucked under rough wool in the smoky loft, allow yourself to drift again, comforted by the strange old truth that even in a winter storm over a dark river, sleep is easier when something small and smug is guarding the crumbs. Sleep comes in shallow layers, not one deep plunge. You drift, wake, drift again. The cat at your feet becomes a warm weight, then a shadow, then part of the bed itself. The river turns into a long dark ribbon in your mind. The shutter taps in some distant room of thought. For a while, you are neither fully awake nor fully asleep, only floating inside the bridge house as it creaks and breathes above the winter water. Then a sound rises from below. Coins. Not many, just a faint clink. Metal touching metal, followed by the scrape of a stool and the low murmur of the keeper's voice. Your eyes open into darkness. The loft is still cold. The window is not yet light. Yet the household has begun to stir, because bridges do not respect the emotional importance of dawn. Another clink. The cat lifts its head. Its ears turn toward the ladder. It considers whether coins are edible, interesting, or beneath it, deciding on beneath it. The cat tucks its nose back into its tail. You lie still and listen. Below, the doorbar slides, hinges complain softly. Cold air enters the house in a brief white breath. Voices come with it, muffled by a wool and weather. A man, perhaps two. A mule snorts outside, harness rings. The keeper speaks in a tone that belongs to early mornings, not unfriendly, but unwilling to waste syllables. Someone laughs quietly and is ignored. A merchant has arrived before dawn. You sit up, wrapping the blanket around your shoulders. The straw mattress rustles. The other sleeper in the loft mutters and rolls away from the sound. You remain where you are, listening through the floorboards as the business of the bridge begins in the dark. The merchant says he carries wool cloth, 2 small bales, and a pack of dyed thread. He must be across before the road becomes crowded. The keeper asks whether the mule is shod properly, because loose shoes on wet stones are everybody's problem. The merchant replies that the animal is more reliable than his apprentice, which earns a dry sound from the keeper that may be amusement or merely breath leaving the body. Coins change hands. Bridge tolls were one of the everyday ways medieval communities paid for infrastructure. Depending on place and period, charges could fall on carts, animals, goods, market loads, or people. Some tolls were fixed by charter. Others were disputed, farmed out, abused, forgiven, or collected with the kind of enthusiasm that makes travellers suddenly remember urgent alternate routes. Still, bridges needed paving, parapets, timber repairs, debris removal, and occasional rebuilding. A crossing that seemed solid in daylight was supported by a steady trickle of small payments, like this one below your bed. You hear the keeper mark something, perhaps on a tally stick or wax tablet, a simple transaction, but it connects the whole world. Sheep grazing in upland pastures, women and men spinning thread in cottages, fullers beating cloth in watermills, dyers stirring vats, pack animals carrying goods from town to town, a toll-keeper near a smoky hearth, and you under a blanket. Eavesdropping on commerce because history has poor soundproofing. The merchant stamps his feet outside, the mule snorts again, the keeper gives permission to pass. A moment later, hooves move across the bridge, slow, careful. The rhythm travels through the building, clop, pause, with the occasional scrape as iron meets wet stone. The bales must be covered with waxed cloth or tightly woven wrapping. Because winter rain is not kind to merchandise, damp cloth can mildew, dyes can run, and customers are famously reluctant to pay well for goods that smell like river fog and regret. You pull the blanket tighter. Your own clothes are still downstairs, drying near the hearth, and for a moment you imagine the merchant's wares hung on a frame, steaming like your footcloths. The thought makes you smile. Another group comes soon after. This time the voices are rougher, more local, a man leading 2 pigs, or trying to. The animals complain with shrill determination. One refuses to step forward. The other discovers an urgent interest in the doorpost. The keeper's patience becomes a visible thing, even from above, because you can hear it hardening. Pigs were common in medieval towns and villages, useful for meat, fat, chtit, and scavenging, though they were also experts in public disorder. Many towns issued regulations about wandering animals, because pigs, geese, dogs, and livestock could damage goods, foul streets, block traffic, and generally behave like tiny civic crises. Driving them across a bridge before dawn in a storm sounds, frankly, like an activity invented by someone who has never wished for peace. The pigs eventually move, not gracefully, not willingly, but they move. Their hooves patter and slip across the stones, accompanied by muttered encouragement from the man and what may be criticism from the keeper. The bridge absorbs it all: wool merchants, pigs, mules, grudges, payments, jokes, and the river below collecting every dropped word. A rather odd custom appears in some toll lists and local regulations. Charges could be astonishingly specific. A toll might distinguish between a horse loaded with grain, a cart of firewood, a basket of fish, a drove of sheep, or a single beast for market in some places. Exemptions applied to clergy, local residents, certain officials, or people carrying particular goods. Medieval bureaucracy did not lack imagination. It could look at a chicken and think, yes, but what kind of chicken, and under whose authority? You imagine the keeper making such distinctions at this hour, in cold smoke and weak lantern light. 1 mule, 2 bales, 2 pigs, though perhaps one should be taxed extra for attitude. A man with a sack of nails, a woman carrying eggs wrapped in straw, a boy sent ahead with a message and no money, hoping speed counts as payment. The bridge is both road and filter. Not everyone passes unnoticed. The question of how fair these tolls felt to ordinary travellers is not easily answered. Legal records preserve complaints, charters defend rights, and accounts list income. But resentment rarely leaves neat measurements. Did travellers accept tolls as the price of safety and maintenance, or grumble that someone always has a handout? Most likely both, depending on the weather. The collector, the road behind them, and the mood of the animal they were leading. Human beings have never needed much encouragement to grumble at fees. Below, the keeper closes the door again. The room exhales. For a short while, there is quiet. Then the first pale sign of dawn begins. Not as light exactly, but as a thinning of darkness behind the shutter. The loft slowly gains edges. The beam above you becomes visible. The hanging cloth shows its faded patches. The cat opens one eye. Offended by mourning as a concept, you decide to rise. This is not a heroic decision. It is more of a slow surrender. You swing your feet down, find your partly warmed footcloths, and wrap them around your feet. They are not fully dry, but they no longer feel like river weeds. Your boots, when you reach the lower room, will probably be wearable. Civilization advances in small victories. You descend the ladder wrapped in the blanket. The hearthroom smells of ash, drying wool, and cold air recently admitted. The keeper sits at the table with the toll dish, a lantern, and a face shaped by interrupted sleep. They nod to you as if travellers appearing in blankets at dawn are routine, which perhaps they are. Your clothes hang near the hearth. Dry enough, the cloak is still damp at the hem, but better. Your tunic holds smoke now, and warmth. You dress carefully, each layer returning you to yourself. Outside, another cart approaches, wheels grinding on the bridgestones. The day has not arrived fully, but work has. You stand by the hearth, watching the keeper count coins in the dim light. Small payments for passage, small marks in wax, small acts that hold a great stone crossing in repair year after year. The river runs below, indifferent to money. The bridge above depends on it, and as the next traveller knocks, you understand that dawn on a medieval bridge begins not with birdsong, but with hooves, coins, breath in cold air, and the keeper's hand reaching once more for the keys. The keeper's hand reaches for the keys, and your own hand reaches for the door latch with far less confidence. You have dressed again. Your tunic is smoky and warm through the shoulders, your cloak still damp along the hem, your footcloths tolerable if not exactly cheerful. The boots are the greatest victory. They are stiff from drying, but not frozen, and when you push your feet into them, they accept you with only moderate resentment. Then your body reminds you of another ancient truth. After pottage, ale, cold and interrupted sleep, one must eventually visit the privy. This realization arrives quietly, then becomes impossible to ignore. You look toward the keeper, hoping perhaps the house contains some hidden civilized arrangement. A discreet chamber warmed by angels and scented with rosemary. The keeper sees your expression and points toward the rear passage, then makes a second gesture outside, toward a small structure reached by a covered bit of walkway near the bridge edge. Of course, the convenience is over water. Medieval sanitation was practical, varied and very direct, in castles, monasteries, towns and bridge buildings. Privies might empty into pits, cesspits, ditches, rivers, moats, or channels, depending on wealth, setting, and local regulation. Some urban authorities tried to control waste disposal because even medieval noses had limits, and fouled streets, wells, and waterways caused real problems. But running water was tempting. If a river was already moving, people asked it to carry away what they did not wish to keep. The river was not consulted. You wrap your cloak around you and take the small lantern offered by the keeper. Its flame wobbles behind the horn pane, casting a weak amber glow. The keeper tells you to mind the boards, because they are slick. This is not the sort of advice one ignores. Falling into a winter river on the way to a privy would be a deeply undignified end to your bedtime history experience. You open the inner door and step into the passage. The cold comes at once, not the dramatic cold of the road, but a narrow, sneaky cold that lives between walls and under planks. The passage smells of wet stone, stale air, ashes, and river damp. You move carefully, holding the lantern low. Its light reveals rough boards, iron nails, a patched place in the wall. and a little trail of grit carried in by many shoes. A door at the far end opens outward. The wind slips in before you do, pushing at the lantern flame. You shield it with your hand and step onto the small covered walkway. It hangs along the side of the bridge house, partly sheltered by the overhanging roof, but very much aware of the river below. The parapet is near. Too near. The boards beneath your feet creak with the kind of theatrical timing that feels personal. Dawn is only beginning to grey the world. The river is visible now as a dark, swollen movement beneath the arches. Mist rises from it. Sleet has softened to cold rain, fine and sharp, across the bridge. The outlines of other houses and shop fronts emerge, crooked and close together, their roofs beaded with wet. Smoke begins to lift from a few chimneys, then is flattened by the wind. The privy itself is a tiny wooden enclosure, barely large enough for a human and their regrets. Its door hangs slightly crooked. The seat is smooth from use and cold enough to make you reconsider every life choice that brought you here. There is a gap below, and through it comes the sound of the water moving under the bridge. You pause. The modern mind, spoiled by plumbing, porcelain, heated rooms, paper, light switches, and the illusion of privacy, has many feelings at this threshold. The medieval body, however, is less sentimental. It says get on with it. So you do. We remain polite. PG-13, historically honest, but merciful. The cold is breathtaking. The wind worries the boards. The lantern sits on a little shelf and throws shadows across the wooden wall. Through cracks, you see the river slipping past, carrying foam, twigs, and the grey first light of morning. It is not comfortable, it is not glamorous, but it is also, in a strange way, efficient. The privy is placed where gravity and water do the work. Gravity, as usual, has no union restrictions. By the later Middle Ages, many towns had rules about where waste could be dumped, how cesspits should be maintained, and who was responsible for cleaning drains or gutters. Enforcement varied, because rules and reality have always had a complicated relationship. Some places employed workers to remove waste, clear channels, or cart refuse beyond town. Monasteries could have more elaborate water systems, with latrines arranged over flowing channels. Urban households often use cesspits or shared facilities. A bridge house over a river fits into that broader world of practical disposal. Though not necessarily one any health inspector would applaud, a strange little habit belongs to this subject too. People sometimes used whatever was available for cleaning leaves. Moss, hay, straw, wool scraps, linen rags, or smooth sticks, depending on place and means. Archaeologists have found medieval toilet aids in some settings, including reused textile fragments and shaped wooden items. There is no need to romanticize it. The past was resourceful, and occasionally very personal. You finish as quickly as dignity allows. When you step out, the walkway seems almost welcoming by comparison, which tells you how standards shift. The rain touches your face, you draw your cloak close and stand for one breath. Just one, looking over the river. The storm has not ended, but it has grown tired. The clouds are lower and paler. The water remains high, curling around curtain around the bridge piers in brown-black folds. Bits of reed spin in an eddy. A branch turns slowly, catches, breaks free, and vanishes under the arch. This is why the privy is here, you think. This is why the bridge is here. This is why the chapel is here. The toll chest, the flood marks, the drying rack, the cat, the keys. Everything in this little world is arranged around movement, water moving, people moving, goods moving, waste moving, prayers moving upward, smoke moving badly, warmth moving too slowly, coins moving from traveller to keeper. The exact health consequences of medieval waste disposal remain a matter of careful interpretation, because practices differed widely and evidence can be patchy. Some communities showed real concern about clean water and nuisance smells, while others tolerated conditions that would make modern stomachs resign immediately. Disease was shaped by many factors crowding: animals, water sources, diet, trade, season, and chance from this walkway, with the river below and the privy behind you. The system feels both sensible and risky, very medieval, in other words, practical until it is not. You return through the narrow passage with renewed appreciation for the hearthroom. The door closes behind you, and the sudden reduction of wind feels luxurious. Inside, the keeper looks up only briefly. They have seen many travellers make this little journey. No ceremony is required. You set the lantern down and warm your fingers near the coals. The cat appears from somewhere under the bench, stretches magnificently, and looks at you as though it knows everything and disapproves of most of it. You do not argue. The household is waking now. The younger person from the loft descends, hair tangled, face soft with sleep. They go first to the hearth, then to a bucket, splashing water into a basin. The sound is small and clean. Someone outside calls for passage. A cart rolls slowly over the bridge, wheels grinding damp grit against stone. Morning work enters before daylight fully does. You stand beside the fire and let warmth return through your boots. The privy walk has made the room feel almost grand. The smoky ceiling, the cramped table, the hanging clothes, the toll dish, all of it seems precious. Civilization, you realize, is not always marble columns and illuminated manuscripts. Sometimes it is simply a dry patch of floor after a freezing wooden seat over a winter river. The keeper opens the door to the next traveller, and grey light spills across the threshold. You breathe in smoke, rain, ash, wool, and waking day. You've survived the bridge house's least poetic necessity, which is no small achievement, and now, with your hands warming and the river still running beneath the stones, the morning begins to reveal what the storm has done. Slowly and without drama at first. Grey light slips through cracks in the shutters and turns the room from firelit amber to the colour of wet wool. The hearth still glows, but it no longer owns the space. Daylight, thin and reluctant, shows the stains on the walls, the mud by the threshold, the drying garments stiff on their rack, the ash settled along the stones. Night made everything mysterious. Morning makes it practical. The keeper opens the front shutter a little wider. Cold air enters, carrying the smell of rain, river mud, horse sweat, and wet stone. Outside, the bridge road is slick and shining. Puddles sit in shallow dips between paving stones. Straw, leaves, and broken twigs have collected against the edges of shops. A signboard across the way hangs crooked, still swinging faintly though the strongest wind has passed. It knocks the wall at uneven intervals, as if too tired to keep proper rhythm. You step closer and look out. The bridge is awake, but cautiously. A few people move along the roadway, heads covered, shoulders hunched. A woman sweeps water away from her threshold with a twig broom. A boy carries a bucket and pauses to stare at the river, then receives a sharp command from somewhere inside and remembers he has a task. Two men stand near the parapet, pointing downstream. The river is high in the morning light, brown and cold, swollen with debris. It pushes through the arches with a force that makes the bridge seem even more impressive and more fragile at the same time. Foam catches around one pier, circles, breaks, and slides away. A branch has lodged against the stone, not a huge one, but large enough to draw attention. Smaller twigs gather round it, making the beginning of a snarl. The keeper sees it too. Their face changes. Not alarm, exactly. Assessment. The expression of someone who has lived long enough with a bridge to know that small problems are not small if the river is invited to keep adding to them. They take the iron-capped staff from beside the door, then a coil of rope, then call to someone outside. Within minutes, 3 people have gathered near the troublesome pier: the keeper, a mason or bridge worker with a leather apron darkened by rain, and a younger man carrying a long pole. You follow at a careful distance, not because you are useful, but because history is happening and you are nosy in an educational way. The bridge stones are treacherous. Your boots scrape for grip. Rain beads on your cloak. The wind is weaker than during the night, but it still comes along the river in cold breaths, lifting loose hair, tugging at sleeves, finding every opening in your clothing with impressive dedication. At the parapet, you look down. The branch bumps and twists against the pier, pinned by the current. The younger man lowers the pole and prods at it, but the water shoves back. The branch rolls, catches again, and gathers another knot of reeds. The keeper mutters that if the river brings a whole tree next, everyone will be delighted in the usual miserable way. Bridge maintenance in medieval towns was constant work. Paving had to be mended after carts and hooves loosened stones. Timber railings, gates, shop fronts, and temporary structures needed repair. Stone piers could suffer from scour, where fast water removed material around their foundations. Debris had to be cleared before it increased pressure on the bridge. Even a well-built stone crossing was not simply built once and admired forever. It was watched, patched, funded, argued over, and saved repeatedly from weather, traffic, and human optimism. The mason crouches beside the parapet and studies the line of stones along the edge. They run their hand over a crack, then scrape mud away with a small tool. Their fingers are broad, nails dark, knuckles swollen from cold and work. They do not rush. Craft knowledge lives in that slowness. A modern engineer might produce measurements, diagrams, calculations, all valuable. This mason reads where. Water, mortar, and sound with the body. They tap one stone with a hammer, the note is dull. They tap another. A clearer sound answers. You listen as if the bridge is speaking in a language you almost understand. Solid, loose, wet, holding. Watch this one. Come back after the water falls. Medieval masons and carpenters learned through apprenticeship, long practice, and transmitted rules of craft. Major building projects involved master masons who could plan complex structures, manage workers, select stone, understand geometry, and adapt to local materials. Yet daily maintenance also depended on less celebrated workers who knew how to reset paving, replace timbers, clear drains, and spot trouble before it became ruin. Cathedrals inspire awe, of course, but a bridge that gets you and 2 indignant pigs across a flooded river also deserves respect. A small crowd forms, because people have always gathered around repair work with the confident uselessness of spectators. A fish seller says the branch should be pulled from downstream. A carter says it should be pushed from upstream. The younger man says both suggestions are easier when spoken by people not holding the pole. The keeper tells everyone to stand back unless they want to be included in the river's collection. The branch finally shifts, the pole catches it near a fork. The younger man leans his full weight against it. The keeper braces the rope. The mason reaches with a hook. For a breath, nothing moves. Then the current turns the branch sideways and it tears free, spinning under the arch and shooting downstream with the smaller debris traily brinda upon Kirknes. The little crowd murmurs approval, as if they personally assisted by breathing nearby. A strange belief sometimes attached to bridge repairs, especially after storms. In some places, people spoke as though a bridge had moods, luck, or a need to be appeased after damage. Workers might tuck objects into repairs, mark stones, bless work, or simply follow old customs whose original meanings had blurred. Archaeologists have found deliberately concealed shoes, animal bones, coins, and other objects in buildings, though interpretation varies. Were they charms, offerings, memorials, casual rubbish in very suspicious places, or a mixture of all the past enjoys keeping a straight face. The mason notices you watching the crack they tapped earlier. They say it is not new. That is good. Apparently. A new crack has a sharp look, an old crack has weather in it. This one will need packing and pointing when the stone's dry enough. Not today. Today. The bridge is too wet, and mortar laid badly in cold rain is a promise made by a liar. There is ongoing disagreement among historians of technology about how much medieval builders relied on formal geometric knowledge compared with accumulated rule of thumb and sight experience. The answer almost certainly changes by project, region, and status. A great royal bridge, a monastic water system, a small town repair, each involve different levels of design and documentation. Standing here, watching cold hands test stone in the rain, you sense that practice itself can be a kind of intelligence, one that does not need to explain itself elegantly to be real. The keeper walks along the parapet, checking for shifted stones, loose coping, block drains, and damaged boards. You follow, feeling the bridge beneath your boots with new attention. Last night it was shelter, now it is work. Every surface asks for care. The paving stones are not just a road, they're a skin-over structure. The parapet is not just a boundary, it keeps carts, animals, and sleepy travellers from becoming river stories. The arch is not just beautiful, it is labour frozen into shape. Near the bridge house, a roof tile is cracked, a shutter hinge is bent. The signboard across the way still knocks until its owner climbs onto a stool and ties it with cord, grumbling as though the storm has insulted the family personally. Water drips from every edge. The chapel bell rope, visible through a partly open door, hangs still. The mason and keeper return to the doorway. There will be more inspection later, they say, when the water drops and the light improves. For now, the bridge is held. That phrase moves through the little crowd like warmth. The bridge has held. You step back inside the house, bringing rain on your cloak and mud on your boots. The hearthroom seems smaller than before, but more precious. Its beams, stones, latch, rack, table, and ladder are all part of the same stubborn survival. The storm spent the night trying every weakness it could find, and the morning answers not with triumph but with work. Someone adds wood to the fire. Smoke rises. Outside, the river continues downstream with its stolen branch and its unfinished plans. Inside, the keeper hangs the rope back on its peg, sets the staff near the door, and reaches again for the toll dish, because repairs need coins, travellers need crossing, and life, with admirable nerve, continues. Life continues, and by late morning the bridge house has become a place of drying, counting, mending, and storytelling. The storm has weakened to a cold drizzle. It still taps the roof and beads along the window ledges, but its anger has drained away. The river remains high, though no longer seems to be rising. That alone changes the mood. People speak more freely when water stops climbing. Even the keeper's shoulders have lowered a little, though not entirely. A bridge keeper who relaxes completely during flood season is either new, foolish, or asleep. Inside, the hearth has regained its authority. Wet cloaks hang from pegs. A pair of gloves stiffens near the fire. Your own cloak, though smoky enough to season a ham, is nearly dry. The cat sits on the warmest patch of floor, eyes half closed, looking like the rightful owner of both house and bridge, which is probably accurate. Travellers drift in and out, some paying tolls, some asking whether the road beyond is clear, some simply hovering near the fire for a breath longer than necessary. The keeper tolerates this within reason. Warmth, like charity, is best offered before people begin leaving puddles everywhere. A peddler comes first, bent under a pack wrapped in oiled cloth. He is thin, red-nosed, and cheerful in the way of people who survive by being welcome in kitchens. The keeper knows him. He sells needles, pins, ribbons, cheap brooches, little combs, and small packets of thread. Nothing grand, everything useful. He sets his pack on a bench and produces a tin badge shaped like a fish, slightly dented. "River Saint," he says. The keeper snorts. "Last month it was a harvest saint." "Saints are busy," says the peddler. You admire this answer. It is flexible, economical, and impossible to disprove before noon. Around the hearth, people settle into the old habit of sharing stories while tools and cloth dry. The peddler claims that downstream, near a bend where reeds grow thick, people sometimes hear bells under the water when storms pass. Not chapel bells from the bridge, he insists. Drowned bells. Bells from a church swallowed long ago when the river changed course, or when a village sank, or when someone ignored a warning from a holy hermit. The story shifts a little as he tells it, like a fish in a net. Stories of drowned bells appear in many parts of Europe, attached to lakes, rivers, lost churches, flooded villages, or vanished monasteries. People imagined bells still ringing beneath water on holy days, during storms, or when danger approached. Such tales may preserve memories of erosion, flood damage, abandoned settlements, or simply the eerie way sound travels over water and mist. They also give loss a voice. A bell underwater says the past is not gone, it is only muffled. You sit close enough to the fire to feel warmth on your knees, not so close that your boots begin another tragic later episode. The peddler's tale mingles with the room's smell smoke. Wet wool, drying leather, ale dregs, ash, and a faint sweetness from an apple someone has placed near the hearth to soften. A child from a neighbouring shop peers through the doorway, lured by the promise of stories and perhaps the apple. The keeper sees the child, sees the apple, and gives a look that says negotiations will be strict. The peddler continues. He says the river has a woman in it, pale as winter foam, who combs her hair beneath the arches and counts the names of people careless near the parapet. This gets a small laugh from one traveller and a serious nod from another. Not everyone laughs at water spirits. Rivers are useful, but they are not cosy. They take things, they hide things. A person may not believe every tale, yet still avoid boasting beside deep water. Sensible. Really. Skepticism is easier on dry land. Medieval folklore often filled rivers, bridges, wells, and marshes with beings that warned, tempted, guarded, or punished. Some were inherited from older local traditions, some were shaped by Christian storytelling. Some were probably just what happens when tired people sit near firelight and listen to water in the dark. Learned churchmen might disapprove of certain beliefs, but ordinary people could hold prayer, saintly protection, charms, and half-believed spirits in the same mental basket. Human minds are spacious when worried. The keeper, who's been pretending not to enjoy any of this, offers a story of their own. Years ago, they say. A cart driver tried to cross during a flood after being warned to wait. He insisted his wheels knew the road better than any keeper. Halfway across, a gust took his hat and dropped it into the river. The horse stopped. The cart tilted. The man finally climbed down and led the animal slowly over, pale and quiet. Next morning, his hat was found caught on a branch beside the chapel door. The peddler asks if the river returned it as a warning. The keeper says no. It was mostly mud and smelled terrible. This is, in its way, a better ending. You laugh softly with the others. The room warms further, not only from fire but from company. The storm has made strangers temporary neighbours. You're all held by the same bridge, listening to the same water, pretending not to be comforted by the same ridiculous stories. Wandering storytellers, peddlers, pilgrims, and labourers help carry news and tales through medieval communities. Not every story travelled in a manuscript. Many moved by mouth, changing at each stop, a saint's miracle, a local ghost, a joke about a foolish official, a warning about a dangerous ford, a rumour of war or marriage. All could pass from hearth to hearth with people who needed lodging, trade, food, or company. Oral storytelling was not an inferior version of written culture. It was a living road. The peddler opens his pack again and shows a strip of red ribbon. Bright against the dim room, the child at the door forgets to appear uninterested. The ribbon glows like a captured ember. In winter, colour has power. It reminds the eye that the world is not only mud, smoke, and grey sky. There is a lively unresolved problem among folklorists and medievalists about how literally people believed the legends they repeated. A tale of a river woman or drowned belle might be entertainment. Warning, memory, joke, devotion, or a little of each depending on the teller and listener. Belief is rarely a simple yes or no, even now. A person may laugh at a superstition and still avoid walking under a ladder. The medieval listener was no less subtle, only less likely to leave us a diary explaining the exact percentage of belief involved. The rain taps more gently at the shutters. Someone asks the peddler for news from upstream. The mood shifts from marvels to markets. A mill wheel damaged, a road flooded near the Aldergrove, a reeve arguing over timber rights, a woman in one village giving birth to twins, the price of salt rising. These facts sit beside drowned bells without discomfort. Practical news and wonder share the same bench. You accept a slice of softened apple from the keeper, who has apparently decided you are harmless enough to feed twice. It is warm near the skin and tart inside, the flesh collapsing slightly between your teeth. After pottage and cold ale, the sweetness feels almost luxurious. The child receives a smaller piece and looks betrayed by its size, which is historically understandable. The peddler sells 2 needles, 1 packet of thread, and the disputed fish-synced badge, though not to the keeper. A traveller buys it and pins it inside his cloak, where no one can see it. Private protection, public denial, very human. Outside, the bridge road grows busier, hooves pass, a cart rattles, voices rise in the wet air. Yet inside the house, the stories linger like smoke in the beams. Saints, river women, drowned bells, foolish cart drivers, hats full of mud. They do not stop floods or repair stones, but they make danger speakable. They give shape to uncertainty. They allow laughter to sit beside fear without either one needing to win. You lean back, warmed by the fire and the company, and listen as another traveller begins a tale from far downriver. "Where?" he says. A bell once rang by itself before ice broke the key. The keeper rolls their eyes, but does not interrupt. The river moves under the bridge, carrying mud, branches, and perhaps a few old stories of its own. The room glows with ember light. The cat sleeps through everything, having no interest in folklore unless it involves fish, and you remain there among the damp cloaks and low voices, feeling how a bridge house in winter is not merely a place to survive the storm. It is a place where people turn weather into memory, memory into story, and story into warmth enough to last until the next traveller comes in from the rain. Warmth enough to last until the next traveller comes in from the rain is a fine thing, but warmth never keeps the watch for long. By afternoon, the bridge road has grown busier, then gradually less so. The storm has weakened into a wet, restless wind. People come through with guarded optimism, glancing at the high river, stepping around puddles, and asking the same questions in different voices. Is the far road passable? Has the mill lane flooded? Did anyone see the cart from the South Market? The keeper answers what they can, or he refuses to invent what they cannot, and collects tolls with the steady patience of a person who knows everyone thinks their own errand should be cheaper. The peddler leaves near dusk, pack tightened. Fish Saint badges safely return to their uncertain theology. The child from the neighbouring shop vanishes with a ribbon end tied around one wrist. The mason returns once, checks the crack by the parapet, says it has not changed, and promises to come back when the stone's dry. This is not dramatic, but it is deeply reassuring. Not changing is sometimes the best news a bridge can offer. Evening folds itself over the town. The sky turns from pewter to charcoal. Smoke lowers over the bridge roofs. Lamps appear in doorways and upper windows, little amber squares held against the damp. The chapel bell sounds again, gentler than before, marking the hour when day gives up its claim and night begins collecting its debts. The keeper bars the house door, but not with the finality of sleep. The bar is a pause, not an ending. Soon after, there comes a knock, not the uncertain knock of a lost traveller, not the impatient knock of a merchant. This one is firm, rhythmic, known. The keeper lifts the bar and opens the door to the night watchman. He stands in the threshold with rain shining on his hood, a lantern in one hand and a staff in the other. The lantern is shielded, its light caught behind horn or thin scraped material, so the flame does not die in the wind. He smells of wet wool, cold air, leather, and smoke from other hearths. His beard is beaded with mist. His eyes look tired but awake in the particular way of people who must notice things after everyone else has decided not to. The keeper lets him in for a moment, and he steps near the fire without removing his cloak. He does not have long. Watchmen in medieval towns might be responsible for patrolling streets, guarding gates, enforcing curfew, watching for fire, challenging strangers, and raising alarm. Their exact duties varied by place, but the need was obvious. Crowded towns filled with timber, buildings, open flames, animals, stored goods, and narrow lanes. Night could become dangerous quickly. Bridge added its own troubles water. Thieves, late travellers, loose animals, and the eternal possibility of someone making a poor decision near the parapet. The watchman warms one hand over the coals. The other keeps hold of the staff. He asks whether the river has risen again. The keeper says no, not since midday, though debris still comes down now and then. The watchman nods. He has already seen a broken hurdle caught near the lower arch. He will check it on the next round. You sit close to the hearth, listening. Outside, the bridge waits in darkness, not empty. Exactly. Emptier than daylight, but never empty. Darkness changes the meaning of every sound. A loose shutter becomes a possible intruder. A cart left badly placed becomes a hazard. A drunk man becomes a danger to himself, others, and possibly the dignity of livestock. A candle left burning becomes a future fire. There is an old municipal logic to the night watch. Many towns organise local men to take turns watching, sometimes by ward or neighbourhood. Regulations could require householders to keep water ready against fire, clear streets, obey curfew, or avoid wandering armed after dark. Whether rules were followed perfectly is another matter, since humans have always treated regulations as suggestions when inconvenient. But the watch represented communal responsibility. Sleep depended on someone else staying awake. The watchman drinks a small cup of warmed ale. The keeper gives it without ceremony. Payment, hospitality, habit. Perhaps all three. He tells you that the worst nights are not the stormiest ones. Storms keep sensible people indoors. The worst nights are those with fog, market ale, and a moon bright enough to encourage fools. This feels too specific to challenge. A peculiar custom sometimes linked to night rounds was the calling of hours or short verses by watchmen, especially in later medieval and early modern towns. Such calls reminded residents that someone was awake, warned them to tend fires and candles, and marked the passing of the night. Some watchmen carried bells or rattles, others used lanterns and staffs. The sounds could comfort or annoy depending on how deeply one wanted to sleep. Like many public services, the watch was appreciated most when something went wrong. The watchman prepares to leave. The keeper lifts the bar again. The door opens, and cold enters with immediate confidence. You rise, moved by curiosity, and ask if you may step out for a breath. The keeper gives you a look that says one breath is acceptable. Wandering is not, you understand. You follow the watchman just beyond the threshold, pulling your cloak tight. The bridge at night is transformed. Lantern light pools in small patches along the roadway. leaving stretches of wet stone in darkness between them. Shutters are closed, shop signs hang still or creak softly. Water drips from eaves into gutters, from gutters onto stone, from stone into little runs that slide toward the bridge edge. The river below is mostly unseen, but its voice fills the spaces where daylight had been. The watchman walks slowly, not lazily, deliberately. His lantern swings just enough to reveal thresholds, wheels, door bars, the line of the parapet, the edge of puddles. He pauses outside one shop and pushes at a shutter to see if it is fastened. It holds. He taps a beam where water has been dripping. He leans over the parapet briefly to inspect the arch below. Then he turns and listens. You listen too. At first, you hear too much. Rain, river, wind, your own breath. Meth. A distant horse. The chapel bell rope clicking lightly somewhere. Then the sounds settle. You begin to understand the watchman's skill. He's listening for wrongness, not noise itself, but the sound that does not belong. A cry, a crack, a hurried step after curfew. The sharp smell of smoke from where no fire should be. Interpretations differ among urban historians about whether medieval night watches were mainly effective systems of safety, symbolic displays of order, or uneven obligations that depended heavily on local energy and cooperation. Evidence points in several directions. Records show rules, fines, appointments, failures, and alarms. But here, on the slick bridge stones, the watch feels less like an institution than a person with wet sleeves checking the dark because everyone else needs rest. At a neighbouring doorway, the watchman stops. A shutter cord is loosened. It slaps quietly against the wall. He tightens it without waking the household. A small act, almost nothing, yet if left. The shutter might break, the wind might tear it free, rain might enter, tempers might suffer. Kindness is often maintenance before anyone asks. Farther along, a dog emerges from under a projecting stall and gives a low bark. The watchman murmurs its name. The dog decides he is acceptable and retreats. You are not sure whether the dog works for the bridge, the watchman, the chapel, or itself. This question may never be resolved. At the chapel, the watchman pauses again. He lifts the lantern toward the door, checks the latch, and bows his head for the briefest moment. Habit, prayer, respect, or simply a pause out of the wind. The light catches on wet stone and the dark line of the bell rope inside. You remember the bell notes in the loft, the way they made night feel less empty. The watchman turns back toward the bridge house. You follow, careful of every slick step. The cold has entered your cheeks and fingertips, but the brief walk has given the night shape. It is no longer a single dark mass outside the shutters. It is a sequence of guarded thresholds, fastened cords, listening pauses, lantern circles, and small human choices. When you return inside, the hearth warmth feels almost extravagant. The keeper bars the door after the watchman continues on his route. His lantern moves past the window crack. A slow glow, then fades toward the far end of the bridge. You sit again near the fire, hands open to the coals. The room is quiet. Above, the loft waits. Outside, the watchman carries light through rain and darkness, checking that the sleeping bridge remains for another hour, safe enough. And because someone is walking where you would rather not, because someone is listening while your eyes grow heavy, you feel the old comfort of shared vigilance settle around you like another blanket. The old comfort of shared vigilance follows you back up the ladder. You climb with slower hands now, each rung familiar from the night before, each creak no longer surprising. The house has become known in pieces, the hearth that smokes before it warms, the table where coins gather, the passage that smells of riverstone, the drying rack with its smoky patience, the ladder that asks your knees for one final contribution. You reach the loft and pause there in the dimness, wrapped in the hush that comes before sleep but after fear has tired itself out. Outside, the watchman's lantern passes once more as a weak glow through the shutter crack, then disappears. His steps fade along the bridge. For a moment, you picture him from above, a small moving ember on a dark strip of stone, the river curling underneath, the chapel holding its bell in silence, the houses leaning over the roadway like tired listeners. You settle onto the straw mattress. It rustles, but more softly now, perhaps because you know how to lower your weight into it. Or perhaps straw, like people, complains less when given no hope of improvement. The blanket rises around you. It smells of wool, smoke, and the faint memory of every person who has borrowed warmth from it before. The cat is not at your feet yet. It is probably below, engaged in official duties, or pretending to be. The river's sound has changed again. It is still high, still full, but not as hard as in the deepest part of the storm. The note has loosened. Water moves with more slide than strike. You listen through the floor, through the bridge, through your own settling breath. Last night the current seemed to test the house. Now it seems to pass it by with a grudging kind of respect. You think about rest. Not sleep as a medical recommendation. Not sleep as a lifestyle goal. Not sleep tracked by a glowing device that will scold you in the morning. Just rest. Medieval and immediate. The body lying down because labour has ended. The mind loosening because the door is barred. The household breathing together because there is one hearth, one roof, one river, and one long wet night to cross. Medieval people often divided the night differently from many modern sleepers. In some pre-industrial settings, especially before widespread artificial lighting, people might experience a first sleep and second sleep, with a waking interval between them used for prayer, quiet work, conversation, tending fors, or simply lying still. The exact pattern varied by season, region, class, and household. But the idea of waking in the night was not automatically a failure. It could be part of sleep's rhythm. This thought soothes you. Your broken night has not been ruined. It has simply been historically authentic, which is a generous way to describe being cold at 2 a.m. The other sleeper in the loft shifts and whispers something unclear, a dream word, perhaps, or a complaint to a dream animal. Then they are quiet again. You turn your head slightly and watch the darkness gather in the corners. Dreams mattered in the medieval imagination. They could be dismissed as nonsense, feared as temptation, treasured as messages, or interpreted as signs depending on context and teller. Learned writers offered categories, warnings, and interpretations. Ordinary people surely did what ordinary people still do: wake from a strange dream, lie there wondering if it means anything, then become distracted by the urgent problem of a cold foot. Some dreams were recorded in chronicles, saints' lives, and visionary texts, where they might guide kings, comfort the faithful, or announce danger. But most dreams vanished at morning, carried away like breath. You feel one forming at the edge of your mind already. The bridge becomes longer than it is. The river becomes a road of black glass. The chapel bell rings beneath the water instead of above it. The cat walks across the parapet wearing the fish sink badge, which frankly seems possible. Sleep has no respect for boundaries between sacred objects and smug animals. Before the dream takes you, a memory returns the flood marks on the lower wall. Those lines scratched into stone. Once. The water came here. Once. People stood awake, listening, measuring, fearing, hoping. The marks did not keep the flood away, but they gave later nights a language. You wonder whether the keeper, as a child, was told not to touch them, or perhaps told to look carefully. Because the river forgets mercy and people must not forget height. There is no full agreement among historians about how ordinary medieval people balanced danger with the emotional resilience. Written sources preserve prayers, warnings, moral lessons, miracle stories, legal disputes, and practical accounts. But the texture of private calm is harder to recover. Did people feel more accustomed to uncertainty because danger was common? Or did they feel it more sharply because fewer protections stood between them and loss? Perhaps both. Human beings can normalize almost anything and still be frightened at midnight. You've done exactly that in one night on a bridge. The wind slips through the shutter. Weaker now, it touches your face with cold fingers, then moves on. You tuck the blanket under your chin. Beneath it, your body has built its own little chamber of warmth. The wool scratches, the straw presses, the air smells smoky, and yet it is enough. Enough is a powerful word in a medieval room. Enough dry wood, enough bread, enough coins for repair, enough light to see the latch, enough rope to pull debris clear, enough trust to sleep above water, not abundance, not certainty, enough. You imagine the keeper below, half asleep near the hearth, keys close at hand, toll dish covered, staff by the door, ears trained by years of weather. Their dreams, if they dream, may be full of crossings carts, pigs, merchants, pilgrims, lost hats, rising water, loose stones, and coins that never quite add up. A practical nightmare, very responsible. The bridge itself seems to rest too. Traffic has slowed. The last voices have faded. The chapel is silent. The watchman's steps are gone for now. The house no longer feels like a fragile object over danger, but like a creature curled around its inhabitants. Damp fur and stone bones, tired from holding through the storm. You let your mind wander across the day that has passed arrival in sleet. The first blaze of firelight. The keeper's keys. The black water glimpsed below. The straw bed. The pottage bowl, the shutter drafts, neighbours crossing in the dark, the chapel bell, flood marks, steaming clothes, the cat's secret campaign, dawn tolls, the terrible little privy, the mason tapping star. Stories by ember light. The watchman's lantern. Each memory settles into place like a stone in an arch. None stands alone. Together. They hold. Your breathing becomes slower. Outside. Rain fades to a fine mist. Drops fall from roof edges at uneven intervals, somewhere, perhaps beneath the eaves. A tiny trickle runs down a wall and taps into a puddle below. The sound is delicate after so much storm, almost tender. The cat arrives at last, silent up the ladder, and chooses the foot of your bed as if granting you an honour. It turns 3 times. Kneads the blanket with sharp little paws, then curls into itself. A warm weight returns to the night. You close your eyes. The river is still there, always there, moving under stone. But now it is not the centre of fear. It is the long dark thread on which the house, the bridge, the chapel, the watchman, the keeper, the cat, and your own drowsy body are all strung for a while. You do not need to master it. You only need to rest above it. And before the grey dawn comes again, before carts and coins and wet boots begin their argument with morning, you surrender to the old rhythm of danger held at a distance, warmth gathered close, and sleep arriving not as escape, but as trust. Trust carries you into sleep, and pale winter light carries you out of it. You wake slowly, not because the room is warm, and not because the bed has become generous during the night. It has not. Straw remains straw, wool remains scratchy, the air near your nose remains very committed to being cold. But something has changed. The darkness has thinned. The storm has passed from the roof into memory. The river still moves below, yet its is less urgent, no longer hammering at the bridge with the same hard insistence. You lie still for a while, eyes half open, letting the room return piece by piece. The beam above you is no longer black, but brown, glossy in places where smoke has polished it over the years. The hanging cloth shows its faded stripes and rough patches. The shutter's edges glow with weak daylight. Dust, ash, and tiny straw fragments float in the air when you shift beneath the blanket. The cat is gone from your feet. Naturally, it has taken its warmth elsewhere without apology, as cats have done since the beginning of civilization and possibly before. The other sleeper is already awake, sitting near the wall and tying a cord around one shoe. Their hair sticks up in small rebellious tufts. They nod to you with the calm acceptance of someone who has shared a room without needing conversation. In a house like this, sleep makes neighbours of strangers. Not intimate neighbours, perhaps, but practical ones, and you have breathed the same smoky air, heard the same river, and survived the same storm. That counts for something. Below. The house is busy in a muted morning way. The keeper speaks to someone at the door. A bowl is set down, a stool scrapes. The fire is being revived again. Coaxed from last night's buried coals, a few sharp cracks of kindling rise through the floorboards, followed by the smell of smoke returning, thin at first, then fuller. You sit up and gather the blanket around your shoulders. Your body feels heavy but steadier than before. The cold no longer shocks, it simply exists, part of the room, like the sloped roof or the stiff ladder. You reach for your boots, pull them on, and find them almost dry. Almost. This is medieval luxury. We do not ask for miracles before breakfast. At the shutter, you pause. The bar is cold beneath your hand. You lift it carefully and open the shutter a narrow span. Morning enters. The world outside is washed grey-silver. Roofs shine with wet. The bridgestones are dark and glossy, their hollows filled with shallow puddles that hold pieces of sky. Sleet has turned to dripping water, falling from eaves, signboards, and the edge of the parapet, across the roadway. A shopkeeper pushes open upper shutters and leans out to inspect the damage with a face that suggests the weather has personally offended them. Beyond the parapet, the river rolls broad and swollen, but calmer. Brown water glides through the arches, carrying foam and the occasional twig. Mist lifts from the surface in thin veils. On the far bank, willow branches hang black and bare, their tips touching the floodwater. A patch of pale sun struggles behind clouds, not yet bright, but enough to show the world has not ended. Not. Very considerate of it. Medieval people depended closely on daylight, especially in winter. Work, travel, market hours, craft tasks, and household routines bent around the short day. Artificial light existed. Of course, in candles, rushlights, oil lamps, hearth fire and lanterns, but it was costly, smoky, limited, or all three. Morning light was not merely pretty, it was permission to assess damage, resume travel, mend tools, sweep floors, check animals, count goods, and discover whether the roof leak had chosen mercy. You breathe in the air through the window crack. It smells of river mud, rain, wet wood, smoke, cold stone, and something faintly fresh underneath, as if the storm has scrubbed the bridge even while making a mess of it, somewhere nearby. Bread is warming somewhere else. A horse stamps and blows steam. A bell rings once from the chapel, not urgent, not mournful, just present. The bridge has survived the night. That thought moves through you quietly. It is not a great triumph with banners and music. It is better than that. It is ordinary survival, the kind most lives are built from. The roof is still above, the river is still below, the road still crosses, the hearth still smokes, people still complain, which is one of the clearest signs that civilization continues. You descend the ladder into the hearth room. The keeper is at the table with the toll dish, looking older in daylight and perhaps more human. Firelight had made them part guardian, part shadow, part gate spirit. Morning shows reddened eyes, rough hands, grey hairs escaping a cap, and a smear of ash along one sleeve. Their work is less romantic now, which makes it more impressive. They nod toward a bowl of thin morning food, perhaps warmed grain with a little ale or broth, and a heel of bread. You accept. It is not much, but it steadies the stomach. Breakfast for ordinary medieval people could vary widely by region, labour, season, and status. Some ate bread and ale early, some waited until later. Some had leftovers, porridge, cheese, or whatever work required and household stores allowed. The modern idea of breakfast as a fixed menu would have seemed oddly rigid. The medieval rule is simpler: eat what there is when the day permits. You sit near the hearth and taste the bread. It is firm, slightly stale, and better when dipped. The warm grain is plain but soothing. After a night of broken sleep, even thin food feels kind. At the doorway, people pass in a steadier flow now. A woman with baskets covered in cloth, a boy leading a donkey, 2 men carrying tools, likely going to inspect a key or wall. A pilgrim with a damp hat and a badge on the brim pauses to glance toward the chapel before continuing. The watchman passes too, off duty at last, lantern dark, shoulders rounded with fatigue. The keeper offers him a brief nod, the sort that says more than speech. The night was watched. The morning arrived. An unusual morning practice in some households was to read signs of weather not from instruments, but from everything available: the smell of air, the colour of clouds, animal behaviour, river noise, smoke movement, aches in joints, and accumulated local memory. A keeper might judge the day by how the river curls around a pier, or how smoke leaves the chimney. Scientific, not in a modern formal sense, but careful observation, repeated over years, can become its own rough weather wisdom. Also, if the cat refuses to go outside, one should at least consider the cat's position. Questions remain among social historians about how people emotionally experienced ordinary resilience after storms, since most records emphasize losses, repairs, legal responsibilities, or remarkable events. Did a morning like this feel routine, sacred, exhausting, hopeful, or all of these at once? Nobody writes a municipal account entry saying paid 2 pence for nails, and everyone felt quietly grateful. Yet gratitude must have lived in rooms like this, even if it hid behind complaints about wet boots. After eating, you step outside with the keeper's permission. The bridge road is cold underfoot, but busy enough to feel alive. Water runs in thin lines between stones. Someone sweeps rushes and mud from a threshold. A man on a stool repairs the cord of his signboard. The mason stands near the parapet again, squinting at the stone crack from yesterday, tapping once with a small hammer, listening. The chapel door is open, and through it you glimpse a candle flame, steady in the morning stillness. You walk to the parapet and look down. The river is lower than the flood mark in your memory, lower than the fear of night. Though still powerful, it moves on, indifferent to your relief. That indifference no longer feels cruel, it feels ancient. The river does what rivers do. People build beside it, cross it, bless it, tax it, fear it, and listen to it from straw beds. The river continues. So do they. A pale strip of sun breaks through the cloud and touches the wet stones of the bridge. For a moment, every puddle shines. Roof edges glitter, smoke rises straighter. The world is not warm, not yet, but it is brighter, and brightness has its own heat. You turn back toward the bridge house. Its stone face is damp, patched, soot-marked, and stubborn. The upper shutter hangs slightly crooked. The chimney spees, the doorway glows with hearth light behind the keeper's figure. It is not grand, it is not safe in the way modern safety imagines safety. It is exposed, cramped, smoky, and inconvenient. But it held you through the storm. It held the keeper, the cat, the tolls, the stories, the drying clothes, the anxious listening, the little acts of care in the pale winter morning. That feels like a kind of miracle, ordinary enough to be believable, You breathe once more over the river, and the cold fills your lungs cleanly. The bridge has held, the day has opened, and soon you will step back onto the road carrying smoke in your cloak, river sound in your memory, and the quiet knowledge that shelter does not need to be perfect to be precious. Shelter does not need to be perfect to be precious, and as you stand there in the pale light, you feel the truth of it settling into your bones. The bridge house is behind you now, its narrow doorway glowing faintly with fire. The keeper has returned to the table, to coins and marks and morning questions. The cat is nowhere visible, which means it is either hunting, sleeping, or conducting private business too important for humans. Smoke folds from the chimney and drifts low over the roof before the wind worries it apart. The stone walls remain dark with rain, and the timber upper room leans over the bridge road as if listening to footsteps. You adjust your cloak. It is nearly dry, stiff in places, smoky everywhere. Your tunic carries the scent of hearth and winter. Your boots are marked with bridge mud. You look, in short, like someone the Middle Ages has gently chewed, warmed, and returned to the road. A cart passes slowly behind you, wheels grinding over wet stone. The driver nods, eyes still heavy from sleep. A woman with a basket of covered loaves hurries toward the far bank, steam escaping through the cloth. 2 boys run past and are immediately scolded by 3 adults at once, which is perhaps the most authentic sound of urban life in any century. The watchman, off duty now, sits on a low wall near the chapel, rubbing one knee. His lantern rests beside him, dark and unneeded. Daylight has taken his post. You walk toward the chapel end of the bridge. Each step carries you away from the house but deeper into its memory. Here is where the watchman tightened the loose shutter. Here is where the peddler left in drizzle with saints in his pack. Here is the parapet where you looked down at high water. Here is the stone crack the mason tapped and judged by sound. Nothing here has become less ordinary. Yet after the night, every detail feels inhabited. Medieval bridge houses and bridge shops could be removed, rebuilt or regulated over time when they became too dangerous, crowded, or obstructive. Some famous inhabited bridges survived for centuries, while others lost their buildings as traffic needs changed. Fires struck, or authorities sought safer crossings. The Great Stone Bridge was not a static monument. It was a living piece of urban fabric, changing as towns changed. What seems picturesque to us might have felt to residents like rent. Leaks, repairs, smoke, customers, noise, and the constant thrill of not dropping anything important into the river. You pause at the chapel door. Inside, the air is colder than the bridge house, but still. A candle burns near a painted figure whose face has faded with smoke and touch. The floor stones are damp at the threshold. A little offering dish holds a few coins, a bent pin, and something that might be a tiny scrap of ribbon. Practical, hopeful, poor, beautiful. Someone has placed a sprig of green near the candle, perhaps rosemary or yew. Its colour is startling against stone. You bow your head, not from obligation exactly, but from the feeling that some pause is due. The night brought you safely across itself. The bridge held. The river did not rise to the highest mark. The hearth warmed you. The keeper opened the door. The cat supervised the crumbs. Gratitude, like smoke, finds small cracks through which to rise. There is a curious old custom in parts of medieval Europe of leaving offerings at places of passage bridges, wells, shrines, roadside crosses, and chapel altars. A coin, a pin, a candle, a scrap of cloth, a whispered vow. Some offerings asked protection, some repaid it. Some may have been made because everyone else did and habit has a strong hand. Archaeologists and historians are cautious when interpreting tiny objects found in sacred or liminal places, because a dropped pin and a meaningful pin can look very similar after 600 years. The past is wonderfully inconvenient that way. You step out again onto the bridge. The river below has begun to fall, not much, but enough that stones near the base of the pier show darker bands where water has recently withdrawn. The foam line is lower. The current still rolls strongly, but no longer seems to crowd the arches with such hungry force. Downstream, The branch freed yesterday has vanished, carried into some other bend, some other story. You rest your hand on the parapet. The stone is cold and wet. Your palm feels the roughness of its surface. The pits and scratches left by weather. Tools and time. You think of hands before yours keepers, masons, pilgrims, merchants, children, watchmen, frightened travellers, bored locals, people who leaned here to spit, pray, bargain, flirt, worry and stare at the flood. Stone remembers without speaking. People who study medieval urban life continue to wrestle with how best to describe the experience of ordinary residents in places like this. Were they defined by hardship, resilience, faith, community, danger, work, humour, or all of it at once? Surviving records often separate things into categories: tolls in one document, repairs in another, prayers in another, court complaints elsewhere. But life did not arrive sorted. It arrived as wet boots, hot pottage, a loose shutter, a bell in the night, a rat in the loft, a coin in the dish, and the river always underneath. You know that now, not as a scholar with clean pages, but as a traveller with smoky sleeves. The keeper comes to the doorway and calls that the western road is open enough if you mean to leave before noon. Open enough. A perfectly medieval travel update. You thank them and offer another coin, not required but accepted after only a modest hesitation. Pride also has its tolls. The keeper gives you a strip of bread wrapped in cloth and tells you to keep to the higher road near the alder grove, where the low lane may still be flooded. You tuck the bread into your bundle. It is warm from the hearth. The kindness of it travels through the cloth into your fingers. You take one last look into the bridge house. The hearthroom glows, smoky and low. The ladder waits against the wall. The drying rack stands empty except for a pair of gloves. The toll dish catches a little morning light. The keys hang at the keeper's belt. Everything continues, then you turn toward the road. Your boots strike the wet stones in a slow rhythm. Behind you, the bridge house remains over the river, small and stubborn, holding its place between water and sky. Ahead, the road climbs gently away from the bank. Mud waits, naturally, cold waits too. The world has not become convenient, but you carry warmth inside your cloak and store inside your mind. At the far end of the bridge, you pass beneath the gate and look back. From here, the house seems almost impossible, a dwelling perched above arches, smoke rising from its chimney, shutters closed against the wind, the river sliding through darkness below. But you know it's inside now. You know the sound of pottage in a bowl, the feel of straw under tired shoulders, the tap of sleet on shutters, the bell softened by storm, the cat's watchful silence, the keeper listening for wrongness in the water. You lift a hand, though perhaps no one sees. Then you step onto the road, and the bridge begins to recede behind you, not vanishing, but becoming what old shelters become after we leave them a room in memory, lit by embers, smelling of smoke and wool, still holding for others in the weather. Word count 1194. And now the road grows quieter. You do not need to walk much farther in thought. The bridge is behind you, the storm is behind you, and the river is finding its own way through the arches without needing anything from you. Your cloak is warm enough, your bundle is light enough. The bread tucked inside it holds a fading hearth warmth, like a small remembered kindness. The sky softens. Grey clouds loosen at their edges. Far away, beyond the town, bare winter fields stretch in low folds toward a pale horizon. The mud beneath your boots no longer feels like struggle. It is only earth, damp and patient. Taking each step and letting it go, you breathe slowly, in with the cold clean air, out with the last smoke of the bridge house. The sounds fall away one by one. Cartwheels fade, the chapel bell rests. The keeper's keys are silent. The watchman sleeps. The cat curls somewhere near the fire. paws tucked beneath its chest, dreaming whatever proud creatures dream. The river keeps moving, but softer now, as if heard from far beneath a blanket, and you may let the whole night settle gently the storm over stone, the warm bowl, the rough wool, the dripping shutters, the low room, the ladder, the smoky rafters, the little human courage of sleeping above dark water. Nothing more is asked of you. The bridge is held, morning has come, you're safe enough, warm enough, far enough from the storm. Let the images blur now, let the stones become soft, let the river become only a murmur, let the road fade under mist, and let your breathing find the old slow rhythm of sleep. The house remains behind you, glowing quietly in winter light, and you drift onward, lighter and lighter, as the world lowers its voice to a calm whisper. Sweet dreams.